invite somebody to speak, could you clearly state who you are for the benefit of anybody who is listening to the meeting so that they can identify who is speaking, and ensure that you use the microphones that are in the room. Can I also warmly welcome any members of the public and media who are joining us today. The meeting is now being recorded by the council. Finally, as agendas are now viewed electronically, could I kindly request that members and officers refer to page numbers where appropriate, please, from the published agenda pack to assist all present in finding the appropriate information. In respect of housekeeping, no expected fire alarm, but should this happen, please follow Democratic Service colleagues and they will lead the way out to the car park at the rear of the building. And it would be remiss of me to say good morning, everybody. I hope we're all well. Are we all here? Have we got apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. We have received apologies from Councillor Boyden, for whom Councillor Sieb is substituting, and apologies from Councillor Reid, for whom Councillor Ashton is substituting.
Thank you. Are we expecting Councillor Hobbs?
Expecting both.
Okay. Hopefully they'll be here before long. Lovely. Okay. Any declarations of interest, please? No. Thank you. Moving on. Agenda item 3, to approve the minutes from the previous meeting held on the 17th of February as a correct record. Dawn Denton.
Okay, just a quick question about the minutes. It often refers to a member. Is there a reason why names aren't always mentioned on minutes?
Advice, please, Jamie.
Not specifically, Chair and Councillor Denton.
Okay.
It can be a style thing sometimes.
Okay.
We sometimes keep them generic in that regard, and other times we can be specific about it. I think the general best practice is to keep them generic.
Okay.
But if we would normally only specify a councillor's name if they proposed or seconded or
said something of value. Thank you. Thanks very much.
I'm not going to respond to that actually, Dawn, but was there anything in particular that you were concerned about? I mean, because I do accept that sometimes it's good for councillors to have their names by a minuted action because they might want to indicate that was what they said in a meeting to an outside source. So if there was anything you wanted to be changed, then I think you're within your rights to do so.
No, it's just I noticed it as a general, and I just thought it was interesting that if I went back on the minutes, I wasn't sure who had said what generally.
Okay, nice to see Matt Martin's online. But do you want to speak, Matt?
Buddy, I do apologise. I'm in the wrong building, so I'm going to pop down. I'll be with you in about 15 minutes.
Well, did you go to?
Yeah, I'm in Dean House. I'll be with you in about
15,
20 minutes.
Yeah, I've nearly done that. All right, we'll see you soon.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
I'll take a proposer and seconder. I'm assuming that you've had a look at the minutes. You haven't had a look at the minutes. You're proposing a second. Okay. All right, I'm going to accept that rather than go through it page by page. Okay, thank you. Those in favour? Oh, we ought to have a count there. Not everybody's in favour.
That was carried. That was the majority.
Oh, was it? They're not coming on ModGov. Okay. Okay. Yes, please do. I'll put in a reminder at our pre-meet that they make sure they do. Okay. Yes.
Do you need to flash them up on this month's meeting as well? As you say, it's an agenda item, so why not put it there?
Yeah, I think it should be. I think you're right. Okay, apologies for anybody that's not read them. I think we're all fairly clear that there's nothing contentious about that. Right, thank you. Public question time. Do we have any? None? Thank you. Right. So agenda item 5 is Scrutiny Climate and Place Work Programme, and I'm inviting Jamie Jackson to present the work programme and outcome tracker, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose one of the updates I just want to give, because we're getting this asked this a lot by both members and officers at the moment, is the calendar of meetings for 25-26, which is later than usual, being sort of agreed and shared. I understand from Scott Waldridge that the draft meeting calendar has now been shared with group leaders, or is on the cusp of being shared with group leaders, and then once that's been discussed, it will then hopefully go to AGM for sort of final agreement. Obviously, with that in mind, we don't have definitive dates for our next meetings currently for any of the scrutiny committees for 25-26. So members will see on the forward work programme we sort of tentatively put in a meeting for June being the next meeting. I did have a quick discussion with the chair prior to the meeting as well. What I have found in both this and other scrutiny committees at the moment is we have a long list of items that have been either sort of suggested or requested by the committee that haven't been allocated to a certain date. And I think what would be a good practice to do would be to potentially, with the committee, to hold an online sort of forward work programme planning workshop for the next 12 months. Once we know the meeting date, to then sort of identify items all the way through till sort of this point next year. Obviously, we would need some service and officer input with that, and I haven't had a chance to speak to Paul yet about that, so apologies, Paul and Mike. But I do think that would be useful for the committee and their management of expectations to what they might see. Obviously, we would need to leave enough room in for other items to come in at that point. In terms of the next meeting, so let's call it June 25, if that's right. We've currently got 3 items listed, which is the Levy Fund, MTFP, and Somerset Energy Investment Plan, and the local plan. Very happy to take any suggestions, Chair, for adding to those and hear any committee thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Seeb.
Thank you, Chairman. My first time here, so I'm doing a bit of catch up. I thought you had a task and finish on the Somerset Levels environment policy. Levels.
Do you want to come back on that one, Henry? You're chairing that committee.
We are having major problems in getting dates fixed up for the second meeting. It's being dealt with, I understand, by Jamie now. And we should have one between now and the next meeting, which looks at paludiculture and what Thwag are doing with bulrushes up in the north part of the Levels. And we need to be looking at what we can do going forward with finances.
Chairman, I think my point was surely, notwithstanding that the dates are uncertain, surely the work should be in the list with no date if the date's uncertain. And I would sort of expect the meetings and the report back to be in the forward plan, because otherwise it'll be a surprise when it arrives.
Yeah, I take that entirely. Are you okay with that, Jamie? Yeah. Right, thank you. Andy Dingwall.
Thank you, Chair. 2 very quick questions. Firstly, is what's causing the delay in setting the meeting calendar? And is there anything that we or officers can do to encourage that we don't have the same issue next year when we're signing things off? And the second one is planning a 12-month run of agenda items, essentially. Is there going to be time to keep, will we be able to keep time for ad hoc kind of new things that come up through the course of the year?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. On your second point, absolutely, we would need to allow enough room for things that come up that we can't foresee at this particular moment. In terms of the meeting calendar, I would absolutely want to see the meeting calendar be available earlier than this in 2026. It's certainly the latest I've ever known it. I understand, although I haven't been involved in the discussions, I understand that one of the major delays has been about the sequencing of the budget monitoring reports, which has been a real challenge this year. And I think there's potentially ways of trying to sequence them well for next year. And obviously, that is has been a real challenge for the council. So I'm not saying that's the only reason, but that's what I've been doing.
Okay, thank you, Andy. I've got Dave Mansell and then Alan Bradford. I'll go with Dave first. Oh, you didn't? Okay, Dave.
Thank you. I think I did put my hand up. Just on the point of looking at the agenda for the year, which I think is definitely a good idea. It would be helpful to know what's coming to the executive in advance of that, because that would help us set our own agenda. So I hope there can be some sort of indication of what the executive is expecting for their year ahead to help inform us, because that should be one of our functions, feeding in. Right, just a few comments, 2 or 3 sort of questions, just sort of checking. Good to see the green financing roadmap. I hope that might be a particularly important report. And I think I know the answer, but would like to just check. Apparently it's going to ELT first. I'm guessing might be executive leadership team. Could that be confirmed? It might be also helpful that for most of us, that's a fairly hidden committee. If that perhaps could just be explained a little bit more what that one is. Again, I think we can guess, but it's not one that's a public committee as I understand it. Slight curiosity, so it doesn't have to be answered if it can't, but we've got a item on the M5, which Mike has kindly apparently added to our agenda. Can there be any indication about what that might be in connection with, or will we just have to wait? And then lastly, on our last forward plan, we had the annual portfolio holder report for climate and environment, where it said it would come to us before it went to full council. And of course, that hasn't happened. That didn't happen. It's gone to full council last time and didn't come to us. Clearly, we've seen it. We did comment. Some of us commented at the meeting. But can we endeavour next time to make sure it does come to us first? Thank you.
On that last point, I'm happy to ask that that's the case. I think Henry would like to come back on the M5 issue, is it, or something else?
It was called forward by the portfolio holder who sat over there, Mike Rigby, who'd probably like to comment on it.
Councillor Rigby, and can I say, in the spirit of the White House, why aren't you in a suit? For those who are watching in, he cycled in this morning. It's my little joke.
Don't worry, Chair, I'm not about to declare war on you, so it's not that. The M5, when I moved here 30 years ago, it was fairly common through the summer months for the M5 to be closed probably on one day a week. It's now closed every week, and I'd like to get National Highways before this committee, please, to explain why that might be. I think we can probably surmise some of the reasons. We all read the news, but it's very common now. And given that it is the principal route into and out of Somerset and Devon and Cornwall for that matter, I think we need to take an interest as a council in why it's not working as well as it should do. I'd also like to see Avon and Somerset Police here as well to explain their investigation of accidents. We've seen the M5 closed for anything up to 15 hours. They don't do that on the M25, do they? Why are they doing it on the M5 here? So I think those two organisations need to come and have a chat with us. And I know there have been discussions ongoing with both of those, but we've not really got anything satisfactory out of them.
Thank you. Well, I'll take Alan Bradford first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that. I'm glad to see this has been followed up. I did bring this up at a full Somerset Council meeting down at back in North Petherton about 12 months ago. And the MP itself followed it up a couple months later. So we're on the right road length. So, and we did have a meeting in Petherton with the police. Done a lot of talking, a super sort of chat, telling him what it's costing and all the rest. He's going to look into it, and I've heard nothing since. Because it is getting, well, the surrounding areas, that's what's affected more than anything else. The lanes, the small villages, they aren't made for two people passing. And that was a big impact. So some people have been stuck for 5 hours, some of the lanes back in North Petherton. I won't carry on no more.
No, I think you make good points which have been discussed, and I'll come back on that. Mike O'Dowd Jones wants to come in on it. Welcome, Matthew. Sorry you went to the wrong department.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to update that we have been doing some work with National Highways and the police on the matter of the M5 incident management, but they're very happy to come and talk to the committee. We've discussed it with them, so I think there's an open door there, and I would suggest, if the committee are minded, that we do invite them to explain what they're doing on the issues.
I did, obviously, Councillor Rigby and myself have talked about this, and I come back to what Andy Dingwall has just said. Is there an opportunity to put things on the agenda that aren't necessarily in the work plan or not planning ahead? And this is the perennial problem, and this is why I'd like to, I think it'd be good for us as a committee, even with an online meeting or workshop, to actually be able to discuss these things. I think it's very important that we discuss this matter. It clearly comes under our remit, and I've seen myself from the press, although I obviously don't live in this area, the M5 is the closures are a major problem, and I fully take on what Alan Bradford was saying, that where are the diversion routes? They're inevitably going to be through roads that are unsuitable. And so we do need to listen to it. The big question is always, where do we fit it into our busy schedule with one meeting every 2 months? But I think sometimes we do have to prioritise things, hopefully not at the expense of other things. But similarly, I don't think meetings that go on for more than 3 hours are very productive. Does anybody else want to come back on that issue, Henry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was actually going to bring up another issue. If you look at your agenda under Scrutiny Climate and Place Work Programme, there is a blue thing saying Somerset Council forward plans. And none of our scrutiny plans are in that particular section of the council website.
Okay, I think that's a valid point. Can we go away with that one? Thank you very much. So, yes, Dave Mansell.
Just in case, I did have some points on the outcome tracker as well. So if I could just come to those.
You questioned the issue on the M5. Can I get a response from you on it?
Yeah, no, that's good. Know what it's about, and sounds very sensible. So that's good. Thank you. Slight wondering on the ALT. That's not too important, but sort of interested. Connection with the outcome tracker. On page 13, and we had an information report on energy efficiency of heritage and listed buildings, which was sent to us December last year, which was interesting. It said that information would be going on the website. And I had a quick look, and I can't see it on the website yet. So can that action be noted, which is clearly for the planning people to put some references and some information onto the website. And as an item for the forward plan connected to the energy plan, we're moving forward on this now, which is good. There's some items we've got on there in connection, to do with energy, the grid, community energy, and also the economic development. Although we're getting a number of reports on that, but if those items could be included on the forward plan, especially the grid and community energy.
Thank you. Both those requests sound eminently reasonable. That's okay. Okay, thank you very much, Dave. Have we any further comments on this? Can we move on? Yeah, okay. Let's move on then to agenda item 6, National Landscapes Management Plan. So it's James Duval and Paul Hickson to present. Sorry. Duval.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing us to bring along the National Landscapes presentation today. I think historically, the National Landscape Management Plan's been adopted through a non-key decision paper, and we will probably follow that process in due course. But it's important to bring it along today to scrutiny to go through the approach, the process, to understand the relevant additional duties for the national landscapes, really just have that open and transparent conversation with you all today, and to really sort of showcase the national landscapes for the first time officially under Somerset Council. So I'm not going to take too much more of your time. I'm not going to steal the team's thunder, but I'm going to introduce Tim and Ian from the National Landscapes team.
Yeah, it's always good to reveal yourself.
Ooh, and the technology is working, which is even better. Brilliant job. Right, hi, yes, my name's Ian Porter. I'm the manager for the Quantock Hills National Landscape team. And so we've just got a small presentation about the work that we do, but also the new duty and management plans, national. Very good. So there are 34 national landscapes in England. You may have heard of us previously as areas of outstanding natural beauty. Anybody recognise that term? Good, few nods. Yeah, back in 2023, we were renamed as national landscapes, and that was to raise us with the national parks because we come under the same act, Countryside Rights Away Act, 1949, and there's the same purposes, same duties with regard to both designations. So it was just a renaming to sort of hopefully clarify that going forward. National landscapes are hugely different. Ours are Scilly, it's the smallest and the furthest away, 16 square kilometres, and then you've got some large areas like the Cotswolds, which is over 2,000 square kilometres. In Somerset, you have the 4 national landscapes. Quantock Hills is the only one that's wholly in, so obviously we're very important. But together with the national park, obviously Exmoor National Park, the protected landscapes, national parks, national landscapes together, account for 845 square kilometres. That's 24% of Somerset. So quite a chunk of Somerset is under protected landscape of one type or the other. Going on. Quantock Hills National Landscape. Now, we're obviously very important because not only are we wholly in Somerset, but we're also the first in England, designated in 1956. You may have heard of Gower. They always claim to be the first, but we were both designated on 9th of May 1956. They just got theirs signed before us, literally just before us, so they claim. We are the smallest one, though, in Somerset, 99 square kilometres. But over a third of the Quantock Hills is priority habitat, so we're very important habitat there. And this is heathland, broadleaf woodland like sessile oak woodland, and then extensive areas of species-rich grassland as well. There we go. As well as the main hills, which are, like I say, huge areas of priority habitat. We also have a small section, 3.3 miles, of the Somerset Jurassic Coast. Now, everybody's heard of the Jurassic Coast down in Dorset. That's the big one. Huge publicity about that one. But Somerset has its own Jurassic Coast, which is equally as important. And this comes out at the Quantock Hills coastline. Limestone shells formed at the bottom of the ancient seas about 200 million years ago. Very important draw in terms of tourism, but also very important in terms of the geology there, with many of the artifacts and fossils that are found there in the Museum of Somerset and also in the Natural History Museum as well. There we go, sorry. The second one is Mendip Hills, designated 1972, 198 square kilometres. Mendip's very diverse geology, ranging from Devonian to Jurassic, quite a small area, making it one one of the best places in the country to appreciate that sort of diversity of geology and how it relates to the landform. Also, I'm sure you're aware, Mendip Hills contains Cheddar Gorge, one of the sort of iconic locations in Somerset, but it also has quite a massive cultural heritage in terms of not only the prehistory, but also sort of the Second World War, with many anti-aircraft defences, remnants of decoy cities, etc. Mendip Hills, significantly pastoral lands with extensive permanent pasture, though there is increasing levels of arable coming in there, which will affect the, sort of the nature recovery elements, as we'll talk through later. And then Blackdown Hills, designated 1991, 360 square kilometres, stretching from the steep wooded north-facing scarp across the flat top plateau. It's a vast open landscape, but with the intimate sort of folded valleys and secluded villages and hamlets tucked away amongst that sort of patchwork field system. Again, like all of us, the underlying geology and land use has created that immense variety of valuable habitats, and on Blackdowns it includes the flower-rich meadows, ancient hedgerows, the springline mires and heathlands as well. You've got three main rivers, or major rivers, rising and flowing through the Blackdown Hills: the Otter, the Colne and the Yatty, providing the opportunity for nature recovery, climate work, and also the engagement that National Landscapes also work very hard on. Now we're going a little bit outside my comfort zone. Cranbourne Chase at the other end of the county from us do have quite a bit of Cranbourne Chase actually in Somerset. Designated in 1981, total area is 983 square kilometres, quite large, 10 times the size of us. Diverse landscape, but mainly based on the underlying chalk geology, with the chalk downlands, ancient woodlands, chalk rivers and escarpments. It contains 14% of the UK's chalk grassland and 350 kilometres of chalk river. Whilst 89% of it is farmed, it's got relatively low development levels. And for an area the size of Cranbourne Chase, its population is only 33,000, which is relatively low. And that's given rise to significant areas of tranquility and also dark skies, which are equally as important. And then finally, it's always a bit of a weird one. I always feel a bit weird putting Dorset in, because I think there's only about 50 kilometres of, or square kilometres of Dorset actually in Somerset, but it is still in Somerset. Again, another early designated one, 1959. It is quite large, over 1,100 square kilometres. Most of that is in Dorset there. Again, chalk downland, limestone grasslands, green sand ridges, clay vales, so significant variety in its geology. Has led to large areas of heathland. So it's got the largest area of lowland heath in England, but it's also got sandstones which lead to sort of decent arable land as well. And of course, it does have the popular Jurassic Coast, which is the England's only World Heritage Site. But then in terms of other designations, 3 Ramsar sites, 9 special areas of conservation and 3 special protection areas. So what do we deliver? What do we do? The National Landscapes deliver across the 4 main themes, as you would expect: nature, climate, people and place. Whilst we're also trusted delivery partners for government departments, mainly DEFRA. We're very good at levering in funding as well. In terms of the funding that we are getting from DEFRA, one of the big programs is Farming in Protected Landscapes programme, which came in 2021. Just locally, so between us, Blackdowns and Quantox, we've delivered £2.6 million to farmers and land managers for nature, climate, people and place. And that continues. And it's great to see the sort of success of that project with the fact that it does keep getting extended. This year, we've also been given access for all funding, and that's to open up the countryside and nature to underrepresented groups. and local communities. And for 2025-26, for the three main national landscapes in Somerset, that is about 260,000 additional funding coming in. And we've also just been given a capital delivery pot for 35 by 30 delivery, which is obviously government's Environment Act fund, and that's over 400,000. So you can see that we are sort of one of those trusted delivery partners with DEFRA. Track record of securing external funding from other sources. So we've got things like Quantock Landscape Partnership Scheme, which was a £2.6 million scheme from National Lottery. Connecting the Colne, which I think is 1 million Interreg. Chalk and Chase Landscape Partnership, that's 2.7 million, again from National Lottery. And then more recently, things like Nature Calling, a 2 million Arts Council national project, with 2 of the 6 national hubs being in Somerset, with Mendip Hills and Dorset. Nature recovery, all national landscapes have nature recovery plans now. Those were developed over the last 5 years, and they will sit alongside or be embedded in management plans as they are reviewed. In terms of project work and actual delivery, we all do things slightly differently, but for the Quantocks, we have a landscape improvement scheme, which has secured 450,000 from EDF Energy. In Blackdowns, River Runs Through Us project with over 300,000 initial funding. And again, that comes from Lottery and Environment Agency, and other national landscapes will have their own programs and their own projects, all with external funding, bolting on and increasing the sort of the value of the DEFRA money that we're getting in. As well as the money and the projects, we are able to galvanise community action. For the Quantocks and Mendip Hills, we have over 200 volunteers, and they're coming out weekly, monthly basis, and they're doing everything from the conservation management work, things like wildlife surveying and monitoring, and even things such as invasive species clearance, which is quite a horrible task to do, but they love it. When it comes to climate, all national landscapes are going to be embedding a climate action plan into their management plans. And we're aware and have been for many years that this is key to how we deliver across our landscapes. And for many landscapes, work has been going on for many years, delivering sort of climate action, whether that is things like natural flood management, which we started back in 2014 with FWAG on the Quantock Hills, whether that's tree planting schemes, or whether it's things like adapting farming to be more resilient to the climate and the impacts of climate change. Projects such as connecting the Colne and the Blackdown Hills are delivering loads of practical works through their partners, restoring the sort of river system, naturalizations, natural flood management, and increasing that tree cover. A big key part, especially over the last 5 years, I would say, is actually engagement with people. And that's our local communities, it's our volunteers, and it's our communities outside the national landscapes as well. This can take the form of volunteering, sort of that ad hoc engagement, but also the dedicated programs. The Quantock Hills, along with Blackdowns and Mendips, was one of the first national landscapes to actually have a dedicated nature and wellbeing project. And that was aimed specifically at people with poor mental health or low mental wellbeing. And that started in 2015, and that carried on all the way through to 2023. And then that's now been embedded as core work for all the teams. As well as sort of that engagement work, the hills and the national landscapes are well known for their sort of recreation value. Mendip Hills actually advertise itself as being an adventure landscape, which is great unless you don't like heights and climbing. Blackdown Hills is well known as sort of the community hub with lots of aspects such as community community action in arts and community action in things like woodland and things like hedge laying associations and stuff like that. Quantock Hills, very popular with its local population, but also nationally known for its mountain biking. It's got top 3 of the top 10 natural downhills, according to Mountain MTB magazine. I still dispute that. And then place. So place covers everything else, and it's quite a wide area. So it includes a historic heritage, a cultural heritage, which people tend to forget about, but it also includes all of the development, planning, community, economy, and things like the landscape and tranquility come into it as well. So it encompasses our past and also directs our future work. Quickly talk about Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. Who's heard of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act? A few hands, not many, unfortunately. The Act, there's one small section in it, section 245, but it's very important for protected landscapes. So that's national landscapes and national parks. And what it requires of relevant authorities, so that's your government departments, public bodies, statutory undertakers, is that instead of the old duty, which was to have regard to a protected landscape, a relevant authority now has to seek to further the statutory purposes. So it's gone from being a passive, just have to think about it, to an active. You have to do something to enhance the statutory purpose. Now, statutory purpose of national landscapes is to conserve and enhance natural beauty. Natural beauty isn't just the look of the landscape, though. It includes the landscape, geology, plants, wildlife, culture and historic heritage, dark skies, tranquilities, but everything within that landscape is natural beauty. And what it means is that relevant authorities will need to apply the duty when undertaking any function in relation to or as to affect land in a protected landscape. So there's obviously the things that we think of that spring to mind right at the beginning, you know, the things like development plans, drafting of the protected landscape management plans, but also day-to-day functions as well. So things like, have you got land in a protected landscape? What are you doing with that land? Is it enhancing the natural beauty of the national landscape? Don't bother reading. I'm sorry about this. I hate slides with lots of text and then I go and do one. But what this is basically trying to say is relevant authorities can discharge a lot of this duty by working with their national landscape teams. We're specialist teams, we're here, we can do this with you, we can do this for you. But also, if you don't think it's relevant, come and have a quick chat and then we can sort of signpost and say, well, actually, yes, it is, or no, it's not, or actually a quick little change and you can discharge that duty. It's also, I'm quite keen that actually the national landscapes teams are here to help. So it may be that we can start doing more for the relevant authorities and working closer with those relevant authorities to ensure that that duty is sort of engaged and undertaken. There are some priorities, though, that national landscapes, and again, this is the Somerset National Landscapes, we've sort of all worked on this, where we think that local authorities will have the greatest opportunity to demonstrate that you're meeting the new duty. So this is in the assets, so that could be county farms, could be highways, planning and development, an obvious one. PLTOF, which is Protected Landscapes Target and Outcome Framework. So government's given us some targets. I'm sure they've given you lots of targets, but we can work with relevant authorities, with landowners and others, partners, and how we can deliver those. So we want to take that forward. Community energy, low carbon solutions, again, it's one of our key priorities, and we want to work with the local authorities to take that forward. Flooding and drought, again, very important, especially as most of national landscapes are hill-based. And then public health and access, again, just meeting our access and engagement targets. But we want to work with the local authorities to take that forward and sort of try and embed nature and well-being into sort of the core offers out there. And I think that's it for me because I'm aware of the time.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Do
Ian.
we go straight on, or do you want to take questions on that bit first?
I'll take questions now, I think, on that one. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Seeb and then Councillor Ashton.
In another place, I've been dealing with some planning issues to do with the International Dark Skies Reserve in the Cranbourne Chase. Given that the local plan is currently in development, do you see the necessary guidance on, for example, the highways lighting and roof lights and so on? Do you see that being a supplementary planning document type intervention, or something we need to get off straight away in terms of local plan engagement?
I would say, and again, I can't answer for Cranbourne, but for myself, I would like to see things embedded within local plans. I feel it's always better to be working in advance. But we have had supplementary planning documents, I think they're called, so planning guidance, whatever the terminology is now. Those have worked very well in the past.
If I could just come back, Lura 23 makes it a duty on us to actually advance the Cranbourne Chase things, and we are a partner in that authority. We are actually one of the one of the members of the Cranbourne Chase Authority. So surely we are actually bound to produce some definitive and enforceable planning requirements as opposed to guidance. And it strikes me that this needs to be done either now if it's part of the main effort on the local plan, or soon if it's supplementary.
I aware local plans just started consultation, has it, for Somerset? So if it's just started, then obviously putting it through the local plan would be the best solution, if it's just started, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Ashton.
Yeah, you mentioned PD. Is that permitted development? How do you influence or curtail permitted development? What mechanism do you use there?
So that's something that we're working through right at the moment. In the past, we do get consulted if there's permitted development going in, and we would comment or request that it's looked at rather than just going straight through. It's not ideal, and this is why I say we're looking at it at the moment, because some of the issue that we've had is by the time we've received it and we've raised a concern with it, it's already been put through by the planning officer. There's a very short turnaround in time, and we're concerned that in theory you're allowed up to 21 days. Planning officers are turning these around in 10 days. So we're working with the planning officers and planning departments to try and say, well, look, there needs to be more time. You've got up to 21 days. It would make sense to use it.
Peter C wants to come back in again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I appreciate the forbearance. Surely you're talking about specific areas of concern where permitted development rights exist. Again, surely this is part of your team's engagement with the planning policy team with respect to perhaps seeking Article 4 directives to remove permitted development rights for specific types of development. And I'm hoping Councillor Rigby's ears are burning.
Yeah, that's something that the so our partnership committee is working through at the moment. Alan's, this has been brought up at our committee a number of times, and it's something that we're trying to get sort of engagement in taking an Article 4 forward.
Okay, Councillor Norman Cavill.
So just for information, Mr. Chairman, Taunton Dean eventually, off of a neighbourhood plan, adopted the dark skies policy that was written in the neighbourhood plan on down lighting and all the rest of it. It became part of policy adopted by Garden Town. I would hope that any new plan that we write as the county will adopt the best bits out of local plans and make it overall across the county.
Yeah, and I would second that. I would agree with you on that one. I think the dark skies issue comes up again and again on planning, and it's something we need some clarity on probably. I've got Councillor Hobhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm completely at a loss. We have national landscapes and we have the biggest Ramsar site outside of Norfolk in this county, and it's not down as one of our national landscapes. Can you explain to me why, and can you explain to me how we get it in as a national landscape? Because at the end of the day, it is the biggest area of important landscape in the whole of the county, and I know Mendip very well, and I know the Black Downs quite well, but even so, the Ramsar site, which came in 71, should, in my opinion, be a national landscape area.
I would have to say, I'm afraid I can't answer because I'm not Natural England and they're the designation body. I would hope that James, or so if that is something that committee want to pursue, would get Natural England in to answer that. Certainly from an outsider's point of view, I believe that Somerset Levels is equally a valid landscape and natural habitat. That should be considered.
James, did you want to say anything on that?
I was going to say, again, this might come out of the scrutiny task and finish future of the levels, and more is about, the direction of travel next, and the future designations of that levels and more in the consultation with the relevant bodies like Natural England. So I'm unsure on what the designation process is and the criteria off the top of my head, but that is a conversation we can have with National Landscapes to understand what we can and can't do.
Yes, come back.
Will we send to every member of this committee an email going through how we get it designated, please, so that we can take it forward with a view to trying to get it included in the national landscapes. Thank you.
Alan Bradford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say what a passionate team that I've worked at the Quantock Hills now for 18 years, and what a passionate team they've always had in doing jobs and making sure they get the right structure involved and they don't get too many complaints about anything. One thing I am going to say is that the Quantock Hills have changed. Somerset Council sold a lot of farms off in order to get bigger. And the actual Crown Estate has been selling off property the last 4 or 5 years, and those farms have got bigger. So really, a little bit of change is expected. You can't just stick a flag in the ground and it's going to stay like that forever. It just won't. For some of the buildings now that's going to go up, you have to confirm with modern farming and what have you. And it's a very sensitive area, and no one wants us in there stuck up. It's going to stick out like a sore thumb. So. And I think we're working. Something comes at every meeting actually regarding development. There's one that now coming down. It's at the back of North Petherton, 200-acre Crown Estate farm. Gone with a local farmer next door to make it a little bit bigger because smaller acreage is not viable. And it's a fantastic lot of buildings. But in order to put them right, it will cost an absolute mint. In fact, we've got a site meeting hopefully in the next fortnight to try and sort a few things out regarding this, because they will be very sensitive. They're sat on the side of the road, and they've always been farm buildings, but they are shaped in that sort of way that something of reconstruction got to be done to make it look the same. I think it has anyway. Not an easy job, something, and whatever you do, you're going to have criticism. That's why I've gone grey.
I'd summarise that. So it comes back to working with planning, doesn't it? And having a local plan that's appropriate to the needs. I'm seeing any other hands. Just a quick one from me. Very superficial question, really. I live nearer the Cranbourne Chase than most, I suspect. I noticed passing through around about Longleat, they put signs up to indicate the Cranbourne, which is interesting because I actually didn't know where it started, really, where it ends. Are you doing that now as a statutory thing?
No. So each landscape would do what's appropriate for itself. So for the Quantock Hills, we've actually we've got traditional nameplates for the villages that surround the hills. For Mendip Hills, I believe they've got stone structure. Again, underlying geology, it makes sense. Blackdown Hills, have you got any?
Gateway signage.
Okay,
But,
yeah,
it's not a
that's what I
statutory
see.
thing, but most national landscapes have some form of it.
It can be useful. You mentioned that you had some funding from EDF. Is that a goodwill gesture on their part, or are there any implications with being funded by EDF?
It's mitigation funding. Their little development on the coast is having a little bit of an impact on the Pontock Hills, I'm afraid. So it's purely, it's mitigation.
Okay, I think I might have opened a can of worms there because Marcus Cravis is coming in.
Yeah, I did like that when you said the word goodwill. I think it's meant to be mitigation. Would you say, you say it was about 400,000. Would you say that was enough, or would you say actually, bearing in mind what's going on with EDF and work uplift at the moment, it needs to be significantly improved going forward, and hopefully before they finish the project?
As the manager of the Pontock Hills National Landscape, I would say there should have been more. But with it being the first of the new builds, it was a very difficult negotiating process. My first meeting, I went with my landscape planner. There was 2 of us. EDF turned up with about 25 people, including sort of solicitors and legal people. So it was very one-sided. Our biggest success, though, was getting them to actually finally admit that it would have an impact, because their starting point was that the impact would be minor. As you all know, that impact is not minor in any way, shape or form. Going forward, they have done a lot more work directly funded by themselves in terms of nature recovery, than was originally put forward. But there's always more that they could do. What would be nice would actually to be able to see their legacy planning going forward and see what all the good work that they have done, what the plans are for that for the next 30, 40, 50 years.
Yes. Yeah, on that, do you think, because obviously there's still talks being had with EDF, I suppose, with what they've got planned in the future. Do you have a current wish list of what you'd like to see as mitigation? And do we at the council have that wish list? Would you provide one?
I can easily provide something, yes. I can always provide a wish list. And again, for us, it would actually link into the nature recovery plan and the local nature recovery strategy that Somerset are developing. So we would link back up to Steve Jury and the work he's doing.
Thank you. I've got Helen Kay. Excuse me, sorry. I've got Helen Kay online, and then I think I'll draw a line under these questions and we'll come on to Toby.
Thank you, Martin. This also relates to planning. As I understand it, at the moment, when we have what's it called, biodiversity net gain, where there's going to be issues, for example, a new development taking out a hedgerow, or it could take out a hedgerow. I believe there's a kind of a sequence of good practice where, first of all, developers are asked not to actually take out the hedgerow but go round it, and then if they take it out, then to replant it on the same site. And then if they can't do all these things, then they look at off-site mitigation. And I'm just wondering how involved you are with that, because as far as I understand it, the new planning and infrastructure bill is looking that in terms of good practice, that should be the last thing that the developer does. But the new planning and infrastructure bill makes it a lot easier for it to be the first thing that a developer does. And so I'm just wondering what the impact is going to be on the national landscapes, because first of all, I assume it means you're going to get more money, which means that, for helping with some of these mitigation schemes. But also, surely we don't want to be planting trees everywhere. We do, but not necessarily in the national landscapes, because it's going to affect the landscapes. Like, remember what happened with all the conifers in Wales. And I'm just wondering if it means that you are going to be a lot more busy afterwards doing a lot of these mitigation plans for this big housing programme, and whether you're going to have to look at having more staff. And, are you looking down the line and expecting your role to change significantly after the planning and infrastructure bill comes through? Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Would you like to have a go at that?
I think the simple way of putting it. So the National Landscapes have a National Landscape Association, and they have a almost like a green finance team, the nature-based solutions team. That team is currently working up sort of a framework so that we can engage better with whether it's the off-site mitigation works, the biodiversity net gain, sorry, or whether it's green finance as well. In all instances, we will be guided by our nature recovery program, nature recovery plans, and by the local nature recovery strategy. So there was a concern a few years ago when everybody was really focused on tree planting. Now, being sort of the Quantock Hills is 34% tree cover already. So our opportunities for increased tree cover are very limited because you're going to have to start taking out some of the other priority habitats. So very quickly, our nature recovery plan identified right tree in the right location for the right reason. So there are some opportunities, but also actually our nature recovery priorities are more about enhancing and conserving grasslands and doing capture store through grassland enhancement rather than tree planting. When it comes to things like the biodiversity net gain, obviously we will engage with the local nature recovery strategy and Somerset Council, more in a, I suppose, trying to be that broker between the landowners who have the land and are looking at future usage of that land, and sort of the people with the money that want to offset some of the sort of work that they're doing. Other national landscapes, so South Downs is actually doing, South Downs National Park is actually doing a lot more direct work with it. But again, as a national park, I think their budget's about 12 million. They got the teams and they've got the people to be able to do it. We have to appreciate that we're a small team. The expertise, you have to be quite specialised in working all of the sort of the metrics out. So our role is much more about brokering and ensuring that what does happen in the Quantock Hills is the right thing happening in the right location. Other teams, though, and other areas, because we are all different, other teams will take a different approach.
Thank you for that. Thanks very much. I'll come on. It's Tim Youngs, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, Tim. I said Toby. So we didn't get a chance to meet before the meeting. And you're manager of Blackdown National Landscape.
Yeah.
Okay. Do go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm just going to give the Blackdown Hills as an example for the management plan review process, effectively on behalf of the others. And the first two important things to say first is that this is a review of an existing plan. It's not writing a new plan. And the second thing worth saying of importance is that you and others local authorities own the plan, and you delegate it to us to review it on your behalf. So in the Blackdown Hills, we're cross-border, so that means Somerset Council, Devon County Council, East Devon and Mid Devon. And for Cranbourne Chase, it'll mean loads of local authorities. So yeah, it's worth pointing that out, that we're doing this. Yeah, you own, it's your plan. Yeah, and really the plan in effect points back at why the places were designated. So there's things called special qualities, which are, I mean, this slide just shows a classic Blackdown Hills view, but though, yeah, like Ian was saying, the pattern of small fields, hedges, hedgerow trees and copses. Yeah, the architecture, the 760 listed buildings, the whole breadth, the whole reasons for the designation are what the management plan is for the place, to articulate what needs to happen in the next 5 years in order to conserve and enhance, in a nutshell. Sorry, this is a bit wordy, but it's just to show the timetable for the Blackdown Hills at least. So we're still aiming to publish in July of this year. Been quite a lengthy process. I mean, the reason I'm showing this slide really is to say that we've had members, elected members in Somerset involved all the way through. So we've got Councillor Sarah Wakefield, Ross Henley, Martin Whale. And we've had workshops, face-to-face workshops. Firstly, what we did was we looked at a vision and high-level principles. So we started at the top level to say, is this set at the right level in order to tackle the climate emergency, nature crisis, and engaging with people? And then from there, we've sort of drilled down and we've done detailed action plan and policies as well. So it's been, like I say, it's been a very inclusive and co-created project all the way through. So what does the review entail? So we've had management plan guidance of sorts from Natural England, although that's not even finalised, is it? No, not hugely helpful. We've asked yourselves what you would like to see, what your expectations are of that process, and that's all been fed in. We've all done state of the AONB in terms of designation reporting. So what's the current health status of the national landscape? And so what we wanted to see through that is what are the red flags, you know, of are the heritage risk sites increasing, or what's happening out there really? And then, yeah, appraisal of other plans and strategies, which we've covered, Ian's covered. Yeah, forces for change, so everything from agricultural policy to planning and development. And then we evaluated the current plan, which we're all running on the same cycle. So it was 2019 to 24, and then extended for a year. And then, yeah, engaging the public through questionnaires and events. Oh dear, how do I go back? And in terms of DEFRA and Natural England policy, so we're plugging directly into the Environmental Improvement Plan, EIP for short. And that, yeah, that links, as Ian's touched on the 30 by 30 global commitment to protect 30% of land and sea by 2030. And then Ian also mentioned the Protected Landscape Target and Outcome Framework, or PLTOF for short, which essentially all that does is take the Environmental Improvement Plan and create a series of targets for the protected landscapes. I say simply, it's not been that simple, but that's the process. And then in effect, all that partly links back, if you remember the landscapes review way back in 2019 that Julian Glover led a panel. A lot of this links all the way back to that in terms of their recommendations. And then, as Ian, I think, has already mentioned, we're also plugging directly into the local nature recovery strategy for Somerset and the adjacent counties. And part of the way we've done that is through our nature recovery plans. So we've been feeding data into Steve Jury and the team, and then a bit of a two-way arrow, really, trying to make sure they're aligned. I'm not sure this will make a huge amount of sense, but this is what the nature recovery plan looks like for the Blackdown Hills. So we've the first thing to say is there's no white space, because what we didn't, the purple areas are the plateau tops in the Blackdowns, are generally more intensively managed land, agricultural land, but we didn't want to create a situation where we were prioritising some areas which were biodiversity rich and ignoring others. So we've identified 14 nature recovery areas. We've got a plan set out for each. We plug that into funding streams as well, including farming and protected landscapes, so farmers get more points for doing certain things, certain areas. And then we've got a series of champion species, as Ian mentioned, and we're linking directly to them. So that long-eared bat and the hazel dormouse, who, you know, they need to commute and move through the landscape. So it's all about how to make those connections. And then, of course, climate action planning. So we've dissected the Somerset climate strategy, and for us as well, the Devon carbon plan, cross-check that to our current management plan to see what needs to change going forward in order to deliver against the climate emergency. And Ian's talked about local plans, but we directly link across to local plans. And that was it, whistle stop really. So what we're trying to establish today really is to reassure you that we've taken full account of local nature recovery strategy, Somerset climate strategy. We're very heavily looking at equality, diversity and inclusion as well. So we reach out of we don't just draw a line round the boundary and stop at that. We reach out to, in our case, Taunton, Wellington, Chard, communities there, meet Ian in the middle in Taunton. And in terms of broader reach, again, we mentioned the levels. So things like water, we've got water tipping over the top of the hill, as I call it, into the Tone and Parrot and River Isle, same Quantox, same on Mendip. So we punch above our weight in terms of the surrounding area as well as within the boundary. So that's it from me, thank you.
Thank you. James, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back in and say, well, to be honest, recognise the work that the team are doing, both Tim and Ian here today, but there's Jim with the Mendip Hills and the other two areas. There's a phenomenal amount of work which has gone into not just sort of managing the business as usual, but the management plans moving forward. They have delayed in places to make sure that the management plans are right, through additional consultation. They've been linking in with a large number of officers across the organisation as well. So there's been a consultation going back through member representation, I know, in the Blackdowns, and gone direct to officers through the management plan. So it is a process, the management plan, and I hope that they've answered the questions, really along this presentation. But if there's any other questions, please feel free.
Yeah, thank you. I'm aware that Ian might, well, Andy's got a question. Ian might have taken the brunt for the questions because but never mind. Andy.
Yeah, thank you for both presentations. Very, very interesting stuff. I had a question. It might be a stupid one, so forgive me for it. The incentive structure for funding and the funding decisions. How is that structured? Are you more likely to get funding either central funding or within the projects, the previous map you showed with the kind of the prioritizations? Are you more likely to get funding if things are in a dire place and everything's really struggling and we need to put a lot of energy into recovery, or if a program is showing good results and improving, or if it's in a good state? Does that make sense as a question, firstly?
Yeah, I mean, a really good example, I think, is Co-Adapt, which was led by Somerset Council. It was Interreg 2Cs with Steve Jury, etc., which was absolutely brilliant. And what that gave us was the evidence base hydrologically, but also we did a listening phase with local communities for over 12 months. It gave us that platform really to go to other funders, say, we can demonstrate to you what effect nature-based solutions upstream will have in terms of flooding. We can demonstrate we've got buy-in from communities, and that's opened a whole load of doors for us into other funding streams. And without that evidence base, it would be much harder, even into outside of our normal sectors, even to the likes of national, Network Rail, National Highways, where you need to demonstrate performance gains. So it gets very technical very quickly, but Interreg has helped us do that.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? Yes, Alan Bradford.
I think people should be aware of a few. At a drainage board meeting last week, actually, and the debate was more about nature recovery and it was about actual drainage. But if you don't get your drainage right, you won't have no nature recovery. I think that's very important. Everybody has to work with the farmers, get things right. Everybody can plant a few trees. You wouldn't go planting elms on the moor to start with. That's a willow sort of area. I don't think people's aware of these things. Like certain soils suit certain trees. Certain trees got a anchorage as well for the winds we have now, etc., etc. So I'm sure every farmer's got a little bit of a corner they can all plant tree. But it was very apparent that meeting last week, and I have to say it because several people after me brought it up. It was more about the environment than it was about actual drainage. And I'm glad you got the otters going. My 450 fish, I don't know where they've gone to. Last seen, otters taking them out. Dangerous animals, sorry. I thought I'd get you all thinking.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking about the drainage issue. Is that something you're aware of, on top of, thinking about?
Yeah, we sit on the Somerset Catchment Partnership and feed into that. And again, sort of if we're doing planning, either project or management planning, then they're a sort of a good go-to board that we sit on. So I sit on that, representing national landscapes, and there's other boards and partnerships that we're engaged with as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, that's great. Ian, Tim, thank you very much indeed for coming and presenting that to us. Fascinating talk, and thanks also for all those contact details there. Thank you. I think we can move on. We're now on item 7, and I'd like to invite Councillor Rigby to introduce this item, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I'm really pleased to see this item before Climate and Place Scrutiny today. It's a really crucial document setting out the pathway to greater prosperity for Somerset. And I think there's always a temptation with these sorts of documents to go on about, wherever it is in the country, about how we're a really special area, we're doing quite well and all this sort of stuff. I think here though is an example of a document that reflects quite how well Somerset is doing. We are home to one of the biggest construction projects in Europe, which will be in place or underway for some years still to come at Hinkley Point C. We've got the Agratas battery factory being constructed as we speak. We've got fantastic employers, defence primes like Leonardo Helicopters in Yeovil, for example. So we really do have a lot to shout about. And I think it gives us a really good platform to continue to grow. I think the temptation is, if you're not careful when you're doing quite well like this, is to take your eye off the ball and think, yeah, we'll rest on our laurels here. But no, we've got to keep going. And I think this strategy really helps us to do that. In a spirit of cross-party friendship, I'd like to say that I was always quite taken with David Hall, one of my predecessors' statements when he said that prosperity pays for everything. I think that's right, it does, and if we've got a really good strategy for economic prosperity in Somerset, it means that we've got the money in the county to do all the things that we as councillors got elected to do. And I think this strategy does that for us. I'll hand over now to the officer team to take us through that in more detail, but I'm very pleased with where we've got to, but more than happy to take on board comments from everyone in the room. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So to reiterate for those online, we're talking about economic prosperity strategy and its emerging vision and priorities. So is it Samantha? Sorry? It is, yeah. Oh, you weren't on, that's why.
Sorry,
okay.
I didn't have the microphone.
Okay, carry on.
So today we just wanted to take committee through a bit of a background and recap as to where we are with the economic strategy work. And then as Councillor Rigby said, to focus particularly on the emerging vision and priorities for the strategy, and perhaps have to invite some feedback and thoughts on those elements in particular. So just on that kind of background side of things, committee might remember that government ceased funding of local enterprise partnerships in April of last year. And as part of those arrangements, the council took on responsibility for a number of economic priority setting and business voice responsibilities. In particular, there is a requirement on us to have in place an economic growth board for the county, and also to develop an up-to-date economic strategy setting out our vision and priorities for economic development in the county. As part of this as well, we also wanted to think about what matters to us locally. We're obviously still a relatively new unitary council, so this is an opportunity for us to set out locally what we want from that economic prosperity agenda for Somerset, and also to support our positioning with government in the context of the devolution, and also potential reform of local growth funding arrangements in the future as well. We put that Economic Growth Board in place for Somerset in August time last year, and its key function really to date has been to lead and oversee development of this strategy work for the county. It has business representative organisations, colleges, council representation through Councillor Rigby and Councillor Evans, and also representation of the UK Hydrographic Office as a key employer. So it does bring together quite a broad variety of economic stakeholders, but with a particular focus on that business voice dimension. And as we said, today we're going to focus particularly really on the vision and economic priorities. Just as a little bit of a recap of the approach that we've taken to the overarching strategy work, we're looking to get to kind of a high level 20-year vision and set of supporting strategic priorities for economic prosperity. The timeline has been designed to align with the local plan so that we have a kind of common framework around that sort of vision and a strategic approach. And then the expectation is that once that strategy is in place, we work to put in place some shorter term delivery plans to set out in kind of practice how we take forward practical measures against those kind of key strategic priorities. So the approach in terms of the overarching strategy, we've done a number of kind of desk-based research exercises. So we did a review of what we've called here the legacy economic development strategies from the former local authorities in Somerset, and also the former local enterprise partnership, and particularly obviously those bits of local enterprise partnership policy that applied to Somerset. And then we've also looked at kind of wider economic policy, so current government policy, and the Great South West Pan-Regional Partnership work as well. It's also taken in linkages between economic prosperity and other council thematic areas. So we've particularly worked strongly with colleagues working on the local plan, the local transport plan, and also colleagues involved in the local nature partnership work and the climate change agenda as well, with also linkages into education and health agendas. So we have tried very much to look at this in terms of its own strategy, but also about our linkages into that wider policy agenda. And then we've also done quite a bit around data analysis. So looking at our baseline position, looking at forecasts in terms of economic growth, and also looking at how our local position is reflected in terms of stakeholder feedback. So we ran a business survey to which we had just over 350 responses. We had 2 stakeholder workshops where we tested out the emerging evidence base and the emerging vision and some key themes. And we also had an all-member briefing and, as I said, kind of ongoing liaison across the council with other thematic areas. And all of this work has kind of resulted in an overarching SWOT analysis and the draft vision and priorities that we'll talk you through in a moment. In terms of that draft SWOT analysis, committee has seen this slide before, so I wasn't going to dwell on it for too long, but just as a quick kind of summary, the strengths and opportunities, we've got quite a strong focus on our assets and our kind of key sectors. So both our natural assets in terms of our landscapes and our seascapes, but also because of our sectoral strengths in terms of aerospace, clean energy, digital and data especially being highlighted. And we've also highlighted as well the linkages to the visitor economy and to food security around some of those landscapes and core kind of economic sectors as well. Beyond that, in terms of kind of people themes, we have high levels of employment, low unemployment, which is obviously a strength, but also a challenge in terms of availability of labour for some of our businesses, and also a challenge for those individuals who are not economically active in terms of their participation in the labour market and how we support and facilitate that where possible. We also have some challenges around our skills levels, particularly at the higher levels. And then in terms of kind of our physical space, we've got strong infrastructure in many ways in terms of that strategic infrastructure around M5, A303 corridors, and also our rail connections as well. But we have highlighted that we have challenges around that physical connectivity and mobile and digital connectivity as well, particularly in some of our rural areas, as well as kind of challenges around grid constraints as well. And then finally, I suppose, in terms of that kind of enterprise agenda, a bit more clearly, we've highlighted that we have below average productivity. and challenges as well around the climate change agenda, including flooding and phosphates going forward. So there's quite a lot in there. And what we've sought to do is kind of distill that SWOT into what we think a vision for Somerset in the future should be. So looking ahead to kind of 2045, what would we like the county to look like in terms of our economic prosperity? So we have a kind of overarching statement that we're proposing, which is structured around having a flourishing, fair and green economy, which builds on our distinctive assets and opportunities. And we've been inspired very much there in the wording by the council plan and the key priorities and wording terminology that document uses. And then for each of those kind of key words, we've got a kind of supporting sentence around what we think that means for us and for the county going forward. So we've got a bit about capitalising on distinctive assets and opportunities with a particular focus on leading the UK in those clean energy, aerospace, high value manufacturing, and digital and data assets and opportunities that we talked about briefly in the SWOT. We've got the flourishing dimension in terms of business dynamism, attracting high value investment, productivity, growth and exciting opportunities. The fair strand, which is all about people and places fulfilling their potential, improving life chances, well-being, social inclusion. And then last but by no means least, the kind of green strand in terms of an economy that's decarbonised, manages resources efficiently and contributes to enhancing Somerset's natural environment as well. So we've tried to very much look at that kind of economic prosperity agenda in the round in a kind of holistic way that, as I said, links up to other strategic policies and plans for the county as well. And that vision has been developed and refined over a good period of months. So we did test it out as part of the stakeholder sessions. We've had various growth board conversations around it as well. So it has been quite well received overall now in terms of kind of this kind of draft position that we've got to overall. And then the next stage really in the work was think about, okay, we've got an emerging vision. How do we start to kind of translate that into a strategy in terms of areas of strategic priority? So we've sort of landed on 5 pillars, I think we're calling them, of focus. So that first one around, again, that distinctive assets and opportunities for Somerset, a people one with a particular focus on our workforce considerations, an inclusion agenda, business environment in terms of how we create the conditions to support enterprise and investment in our county, places and community, both looking outwards in terms of how we put Somerset on the map a bit more maybe, and also about how we support our places to regenerate and thrive and prosper alongside our communities there as well, of course. And then a kind of underpinning one really around the infrastructure that's needed to support economic prosperity and growth. And then we thought there were 2 themes that come up time and time again that kind of cut across those pillars. So we've got social mobility, inclusion and net zero as 2 themes that we see as being very much key across those pillars to making sure that we deliver on that overarching vision for the county. So just plowing on a little bit into the detail of each of those pillars. In terms of distinctive assets and opportunities, we've kind of divided this into 2 sections. So we've kind of termed distinctive as where we have a particular nationally significant strength and or opportunity, and an opportunity really to kind of transform the local economy in many ways. So there we've highlighted particularly high value manufacturing, both in its own right. We've named it there. We have a number of businesses and a significant level of employment across high value manufacturing across the county. So the likes of Pneumatic, Thales, Valley as just a few examples of where that exists. And as I said, I think we see that very much in its own right, but also supporting a number of the themes that emerge underneath that heading as well. Smart and sustainable aerospace, so a particular focus on kind of future flight technologies, obviously capitalising on Leonardo's presence in the county and its particular position as a kind of sovereign rotorcraft capacity and capability as well. Gravity investment, obviously the committee's heard a lot about separately, both making sure that delivery and investment happens in the best possible way for our local economy, but also using it as a catalyst to potentially move towards an industrial battery cluster for the county. Picking up on that kind of clean growth theme, the tidal lagoon potential in the Bristol Channel and its potential significance for us as both an economic driver, but also contributing to that renewable energy and climate change agenda as well. And then also the existing Hinckley opportunity of making sure that there's a legacy from that investment for the county. And then finally, a little bit about our kind of locational benefits and opportunities around government's agenda for AI and data centres, and capitalising on that to attract investment into the county. Alongside that, we very much recognise that there are other sectors which are really significant to Somerset in employment and business terms as well. And again, that also have linkages into wider policy connections. So we've particularly highlighted the visitor economy in terms of its productivity and sustainability, and also agri-food and land management, again, both as an economic sector in its own right, but also with connections into food security and that land management and climate change agenda as well. Second pillar was all about people. So here we've talked about building an aspirational workforce, responding to current and future skills needs, and empowering residents to support and access the opportunities for education, training and employment to achieve their potential. We've chosen to kind of particularly highlight underneath that a focus on young people in terms of recognising the challenges we have around educational attainment in the county and seeking to improve that picture, and also to ensure that our young people have access to careers, information, advice and guidance so that they can see potential in the county and carve out pathways for themselves with education providers and with employers for a future in the county. We've then kind of alongside that recognised that if young people, if you like, are the workforce of the future, most of our workforce is already in employment, and therefore in-work progression is also really important. And therefore inspiring and empowering individuals to undertake lifelong learning and to make sure that they are able to achieve their potential at any stage in their working life. And then alongside those two, we have a particular focus on current and future skills needs. So working with employers to make sure that we understand, first of all, what those current and future skills needs are, and that we have provision and arrangements in place to make sure that those skills needs can be met and thereby support growth, productivity and innovation in our business community. And then the last two are kind of more around the kind of well-being agenda and the inclusion agenda. So one around supporting participation in work, and we have here both focus on individuals and making sure that they have access to the support that they need to overcome barriers and seek to secure and then sustain those good quality jobs, but also working with employers to support them to have the flexibility and processes in place to make sure that those opportunities exist for individuals. And then finally, we had quite a bit of feedback around the importance of a healthy workforce, particularly in the context of an ageing demographic profile, and working with employers to make sure that we join up those kind of health, well-being, employment and business engagement activities to support individuals to maintain kind of healthy lifestyles and well-being and maximise their contribution to the workforce. Moving on to pillar 3, so this one all about the business environment. We've talked about creating an environment that stimulates and support business startup, scale-up investment, with a particular focus on driving it within that competitiveness, productivity and sustainability. We've highlighted a few things kind of as particular priorities underneath that. So that kind of overarching access to business support to foster business startup and growth, encouraging businesses to decarbonise and managing resources efficiently, supporting innovation, and also attracting and supporting high value inward investment to complement that kind of overarching enterprise structure. And then moving on to places and communities, like I said earlier on, this one's kind of got a bit of a two-pronged focus really around raising our profile as a great place to live, work, study and visit, but also focusing locally on regeneration, our town centres and social mobility, and also trying to look at the kind of, if you like, the Somerset pound, the expenditure that we have within our anchor organisations, our business and our institutions, and using that investment to try and build local connections and wealth. And then finally, we see a kind of cross-cutting infrastructure strand. So recognising the importance of transport, housing, employment, digital, energy and water infrastructure to support our economic growth. So we have a strand essentially on each of those different investment infrastructure themes. So influencing government policy around investment in and delivery of distribution and transmission grid upgrades, improving digital and mobile connectivity, again with a particular focus on influencing government investment, very much linking to the local transport plan emerging picture in terms of a reliable, resilient, better connected transport network. And then also very much focusing on the delivery of housing and strategic employment sites and space, with a focus both on population growth but also employment growth. And then, as we said, the kind of water agenda as well, in terms of making sure that we have the supply systems and treatment that we need to make sure that development and growth can happen. And then finally, a bit of a recognition of overall resilience of our infrastructure to the impacts of climate change, and also the kind of the importance of green infrastructure to our local environment and economy. And in a nutshell, that's the emerging picture for our strategy. As I said, we wanted to really particularly invite feedback on those strategic priorities and themes, if there's any that are missing that you didn't see referenced in some way in the slides, if there's any that you see that you think need refinement in particular, or any that you really don't think should be there or need significant rethought in terms of how we take this work forward.
Thank you, Samantha. I've got a few people have put their hands up for questions, so we'll kick off with Henry Hobhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to try and avoid nitpicking the best of my ability. I'm glad you changed the M4 corridors on the papers you gave us for the A303, because as far as I know, the M4 doesn't come anywhere near Somerset. That's the end of my nitpicking. My real problem with this paper is the lack of dealing with farming and tourism, which are two, as far as I know, and I'm willing to stand corrected, round about 19,000 people are employed in agriculture in Somerset, which makes what Gravity is looking to employ at 4,500 look rather small. You've got it down there as a bedrock, but we need to be actually developing it and asking the questions about what we can do to improve the productivity of the farms in the, I'm about to use the wrong words, in the way that the government are making it quite difficult to farm. And I'll come back to that. And the second one is tourism, where we need to develop a strategy which says that we want people to stop when they're on the way down to Cornwall and Devon in Somerset and actually spend money with us. I don't know any of the answers of how to achieve that. The interesting thing for me in my division is a little farm shop called Teals, which has done a hell of a job in stopping people on the 303. One of the things it's done is have a field for dog walkers, which means everybody with a dog stops there to walk their dog, buy a coffee and travel on. And the other thing that you've got it down as threats, which is direct and indirect impacts of climate change, including flooding. And we need to make sure that that is dealt with. It's been a fairly dry spring this year compared to last year, and the flooding has therefore been far less of a problem.
Thank you, Henry. Any answers to those various questions?
So I think, like I said, we do have the hooks in there for the visitor economy and agri-food and land management, and they are, like you say, very much significant employers and significant business numbers for the county, so they're absolutely recognised. And I think, like you say, the emphasis is really on how we sustain that activity and, as you say, improve productivity and sustainability of that activity going forward. I think as well, in terms of the visitor economy dimension, that bit about raising the profile of Somerset is very much about that bit around Somerset being recognised externally as a place in its own right, rather than, as you say, whether people pass through perhaps on their way to other particular coastal, Dorset and Devon and Cornwall. So I think that there's hooks in both places for us to do further work at the implementation plan stage around what specific activities might look like there. But I suppose just to reassure really that they're absolutely referenced in the strategy, and it is about both building on new opportunities and those strengths opportunities that we highlighted as distinctive, but also very much protecting and sustaining those core strengths that we already have around, like we said, what we've called here the bedrock sectors for the economy.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll move on. Peter Seep, please.
Thank you, Chairman. For a substitute, I feel like I'm using my elbows perhaps a bit too much, but apologies. I keep forgetting these microphones are very, very directional, so you have to have them right in front of you. Is that coming through okay? So I'm afraid my reaction to this was adverse. I feel it really lost its edge in being rolled up into a county level, which had started at the different authority levels, because there's a local distinctiveness. If you look around what Somerset has in the past offered entrepreneurs, that has resulted in the economy that we have and the strong bits that we have. There seems to have been an effort to write all the information down on a single sheet of paper instead of differentiating the needs. So, for example, I would agree that strategic corridors are extremely important in Bridgwater. You just have to look at the number of logistics sheds in the Bristol-Bridgwater area to realise that road transport and logistics is driving that economy to a huge degree. That is simply not the case in Templecombe. Templecombe is as far off the beaten track as it comes, not literally, but it is, however, a world-leading engineering centre. They do a small amount of extremely high-value manufacturing there, but the absolute core of the business for that enterprise is the quality of its engineering, as indeed it is for Pneumatic, Leonardo and Honeywell. Those are not land take, those are quality of life and centre of excellence driven economic factors. So we have to be very careful to actually handle things appropriately across the county, and to look at what's led to success there, and not get in the way, and help if we can. I agree with the points on agriculture. You mentioned tourism. Of course, with that comes landscapes, which we were discussing earlier, and destinations. We have a need to make sure, if you ask inward investors, and buried somewhere in the enterprise is the old Inter Somerset research. If you ask inward investments what they look for, it's good schools, somewhere to shop, nearby beaches, and something to do with the kids. If you ask tourists what they come in for, it's destinations. It's the quality of things such as the Ham Hill Visitor Centre that will drag people off the 303 to spend in Somerset. And we just need to recognise that that's, get down to the detail. You can't SWOT analysis at a whole county level and expect it to succeed. The other thing with which I had a bit of an issue was I looked through the threats on the threat analysis, and actually most of them for me are opportunities. In particular, the ageing population and workforce. One of the things which completely I didn't find in here. The South Somerset and the LEP and the NHS Hospital Trust and the Yeovil College had been looking at whether they could generate an educational facility for care services. One of the fundamentals that we're struggling with as an authority is we can't, our care providers can't get people to do the caring, and the skills around caring were seen as one of the potential opportunities around Yeovil District Hospital for working with the college, which is right next door, to actually generate carers. And simply, I'm not seeing any of the internal needs of the county in this SWOT analysis. And what drew me to that was reading this as a threat. It's not, it's an opportunity. We have an aging population and an aging workforce, and actually what we should be doing is working on utilising, avoiding that being a problem. That's the opportunity. So I am a little disappointed. It sort of read like there were some very, very big county-sized national headline things here where we'd lost the needs of the individual settlements and the individual bits which make parts of Somerset distinctive from other parts of Somerset. And so I was a bit disappointed that it didn't feel like a description of Somerset. That's what what I'm really getting at. But no doubt it will plough forwards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, and obviously this is the ideal forum for that sort of input to come in. I noticed Sam was writing furiously at one point. Is there anything you want to come back on that one, Samantha?
We'll get the hang of this by the end of the meeting. I would say it's fair to say there is a summary SWOT analysis, so it's a few bullet points. We do have an emerging broader technical report, which does go into a bit more detail on some of the key kind of characteristics and considerations. But I think it is fair to say that it is a county-wide strategy and it is deliberately high level at this stage, but we will have the opportunity that implementation planning stage to look at in a bit more detail at some of the kind of emerging strands and activities. I think Paul wants to.
Yeah, thank you.
In addition to Samantha's comments there, I think they are fair challenges that you make, Peter. Samantha's talked about the stage that we are in the development of the plan. I think also that there's something about the complexity of the different audiences. I feel like I'm in a nightclub rather than a committee, but perhaps I'm lucky. So this document has to be designed in a way that captures government's attention. So highlighting those kind of national opportunities is an important part of it. You're right, alongside that, how we kind of make the plan relevant at the local level and how we reflect the diversity of Somerset is necessary. It's a challenge in doing so. We'll take that feedback away. We'll look at how we kind of strengthen that. I'm sure that seeing the whole document capture that in a more rounded way, inevitably, than slides do.
Thank you. Sam, could you turn the mic on?
Could I just quickly respond? I think putting the word local into the, I think it's the top of the 4 priorities, so that you're talking about the local opportunities, might let you get that focus in the national level document.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on to Dawn Denton.
Thank you. I agree with Henry about the farming and the tourism. Tourism is my background. And for me, I think it's a vital part of Somerset. I think maybe there's a case for closing the M5 more permanently so people have to stay in Somerset and not go anywhere else. But we do have people moving through the county, and maybe there's something like with the dog walking, making sure that I understand that this is a draft and a high level paper, but every pub having an EV charger so people can come through the county on their way somewhere to stop and make sure that they do spend their money here in Somerset. And we also have lots of film locations which we know are doing really well, and Frome enjoys the whole Poldark tourism, people coming in to have a look at that as well. I've also noticed that on the Somerset Economic Growth Board, there's no mention of any representative. I mean, it's broadly business, but nothing from leisure, tourism or farming. And I think that would be a really important element of a growth board if they're not represented as, so they're not represented just in a group of businesses, but actually as separate entities in their own right. And then I think on skills development, as there's a brief mention of this, it's important that we focus on young people because we are an aging county, but we also need to encourage them to stay, which is important. But there's also, considering I'm the only woman on the committee, there are also women my age who have raised their families and are looking for career changes, and we have them in the county. And maybe just skill development when the industry that they were in when they left 18, 20 years ago you know, they can go into the workforce, and there's an opportunity there to for that group as well. So those are just a couple of points, and I understand it's high level and we're not there yet for the detail, but it's just, I think that those are important to really hone in on tourism and farming more than anything else.
Thank you, Samantha.
So just on the kind of composition of the growth board, we are planning to review in a few months' time in terms of the composition of that board. As I said, it was set up from scratch in August time. We always said that when we got kind of started to get towards the year mark, we do a bit of a review of where we got to in terms of how the board itself felt, and about how things had gone, and where there might be opportunities to flex a little bit and improve perhaps its function, its membership, but also said as we kind of start to pass from this kind of strategy phase into more of a kind of implementation plan and delivery phase. And we have noted that the kind of visitor economy is probably one of those areas that we do need to look at again in terms of representation, either directly on the board or on potential subgroups that emerge around kind of implementation arrangements. Just in terms of the kind of that visitor economy agenda, more generally, I suppose, we have got a local visitor economy partnership in place now between ourselves, Exmoor National Park Authority, and Visit Somerset and Visit Exmoor, working with Visit England. So there is a forum there now, an obligation on us actually in terms of the memorandum of understanding that we have with Visit England to produce a destination management plan for Somerset and Exmoor. So we have an opportunity through that to set out in more detail than the strategy can realistically, how we want to kind of approach that visitor economy agenda in the county going forward, and how we work with partners to do so. So hopefully that will kind of provide an extra layer of detail beyond what we're seeking to do here.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, Paul.
And very specifically, returning to our work programme for the future during the year, if the committee would like to, I'm sure as that work progresses, we can bring that destination management plan here for consideration.
Okay. I'm just beginning to question how it is that you are, in fact, I noticed, the only woman on the committee.
Well, thank you for noticing.
Yeah, we didn't do very well there, did we? In our inclusion. Okay, Andy Dingwall.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, and they absolutely fall into what I'd like to see in the next iteration, rather than on this particular paper. But my first point, I'm afraid, is I disagree with Councillor Seeb. The threats column contains two bits. When taken together, I think form a borderline existential threat, so the ageing population and the exodus of young people out once they hit university age. I think when you take those two things together, it does form a real issue, and most of the rest of the paper seems to be built on assumptions that we can stop one or both of those elements. So lots of things about entrepreneurialism and the innovation economy kind of people setting up and fulfilling the potential of young people. I need to see something in there about how we keep them, whether that's a strategy kind of guides us towards creating our own university centre or something along those lines. Lots of this strategy depends on us not losing young people out to other places and not and having employment here in the county that works for them. My example, in my personal example, I am a corporate professional, fairly senior, getting on in his career. I can't find a job in Somerset. I have to work in London. My wife is in a similar position. She can't find a job in Somerset. She works in Manchester. Luckily, we remote work, and it's, we bring all their money back to Somerset, and that's fine and that's good. But that's not the case for a lot of people. I know a lot of people who've moved out and aren't coming back. So I'd like to see a little bit more about how particularly we're going to address those threats in order to deliver the rest of the paper. The other element of that is part of my corporate business. Expert's a strong word. I know an awful lot about the innovation economy. Talked about innovation and AI businesses set up in Somerset. They're not going to set up in Somerset. They're going to set up in London, or they're going to set up in university centres, Oxford, Cambridge, Edinburgh. That might be something that kind of links in with that. If there's a university that we can bring here, it might help with that. But again, I'd like to see information about that in the next iteration. There was a line in there about data centres as well, and I was curious as to what was driving that particular angle. What might make us really competitive to bring data, because it's a hugely growth part of the industry. We're going to see data centers popping up all over the world. What can we do to make us more attractive to the businesses setting these up? I think that covers everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's really helpful in terms of the challenges comments. And as you say, I think there's strands throughout the strategy that try to look at that young people priority in particular was particularly say targeted at trying to think about, as you say, how do we both enhance our young people's opportunities locally, but also perhaps accept that some will leave, but attract them back once they kind of perhaps have done some bits of things outside of the county. I think in terms of the overall demographic bits as well, the bits around kind of trying to keep people in the workforce for longer, so that healthy workforce was kind of trying to address that bit around keeping people healthy for longer, but also supporting those who are economically inactive, perhaps through disabilities or ill health, supporting them through both working with employers and those individuals to be able to participate more. And then the bit about the profile of Somerset, we kind of deliberately had in there a bit about the profile of Somerset as a place to work, because I think there is a bit about absolutely keeping as many of our young people as we can, absolutely keeping as many of our older workforce in work for as long as possible, but also accepting we probably do have to attract, inward labour to the county as well. So there's that bit about our profile and recognition as a place that offers good quality employment, lots of opportunities, career development. So that kind of profile raising, I think, is also part of what we wanted to try and get across. So I think there are things in there, but totally take the point that we probably need to do more work on drawing those out a bit more and making the linkages perhaps a bit more clearly into that SWOT evidence. And I think the opportunities that space perhaps it's a little bit glass half full, glass half empty, isn't it, in terms of how you choose to perceive things to a certain extent, but we can certainly refine kind of how we look at those things. I think Paul wanted to come in a little bit on perhaps the data centre side of things.
Thank you, Samantha. If it's helpful, in terms of data centres, I think from a Somerset perspective, it's fair to say that the Bridgewater area, close to you, has particular opportunity because of the firstly the kind of data connections along the motorway corridor and the availability of large amounts of power. So we know through our commercial kind of engagement that there are particular opportunities around data center investment in that quite tight area. I think there's an opportunity there, obviously, in terms of investment. It's very much on the government's agenda. That's the challenge is moving beyond kind of data center warehousing to creating the kind of the business activity alongside it and moving into AI applications of it. That's a government agenda in its own right. So we know that, and it comes back to distinctive opportunities in places, as Peter was rightly challenging us about. There is one there, so that's why it's highlighted.
Thank you.
Quickly,
Andy, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Particularly like that thread about how we bring the business activity around the warehousing, because even in data, there's Amazon warehouses and Scrutiny warehouses up in Bristol, but up in Birmingham, but none of the head offices are there. They're all in the cities. So yeah, if we can pull that thread out as well, that'd be brilliant. Thank you.
I've got Steve next, but did you want to come back on that point specifically?
I just wanted to remind Councillor Dingwall that Screwfix's turnover gets booked in Yeovil, because that's where
worked there for 15 years. Absolutely, yeah.
That's where the headquarters is, and the distinctive local capabilities there were the returns, the purchasing, the intelligentsia of the business. The warehousing part could be done anywhere as long as there was a sufficient data connection, and that was the key thing. And actually, the best thing to do is stick it on the motorway hub, which is where it went.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
I think there's a missing threat here, and that's regional energy pricing that may come in the summer, because we have an extraordinarily high strike price on HPC, which will kill AI data centers in this area stone dead. So we need to make sure that we can lobby as hard as we can against regional pricing. because that will kill it in the sub area.
Yeah, Henry wants to respond.
Sorry to be sitting on this, but AI regional centres require an enormous amount of electricity. And we have got major download problems in both the north of the county through Taunton and the south of the county through Axminster. And there is not enough spare capacity to do many of those regional AI centres. Quite interestingly for me, the guy who owns Tesla has illegally put in 7 gas turbine electrical systems in one of his units in America illegally without telling anyone he was going to do it. And that's the sort of amount of electricity you require to do AI.
Thank you. Yep. Let's come back then to Dave Mansell, please. Did you want to respond to that, Dave?
Sorry to duck in there. Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Ashton raises a really important point there. While Hinkley Point C may have had an initial strike price of 89.50 a megawatt hour, that was indexed from 2012 prices. So today it's £130. I suspect if I look at my phone in a minute, today's actual wholesale price for the country will be about 83, £85. So we're already, if Hinkley opened today, it's already significantly more expensive than the existing wholesale price. It'll probably be, let's not get into an argument about it, somewhere between 5 and 7 more years before it opens. And it's quite likely that that £130 will be somewhere north of £150 at a time when other prices are starting to drop. So I think it's a really important point. I'm not sure it's necessarily something for this strategy, because the strategy is a longer term thing. But I think for this council, we very much ought to be engaging with that agenda to make sure that we don't end up with regional pricing. I suspect that there will be a change. The reason that the UK electricity prices are currently so high is because of the marginal pricing system. The last most expensive kilowatt hour that comes into the system dictates the price for everything. So even if you're generating solar energy at perhaps £40 is your break even, £40 a megawatt hour, you can be being paid anything up to £250 if the price of gas is really high. So I think there's a big piece of work for the government to do to break that link between electricity pricing and gas, but in doing that we've got to make sure we don't go from the frying pan into the fire. So I think there's a piece of work for the council to do, although as I say, I'm not convinced it's necessarily one for this strategy, because I think it'll be out of the traps faster than we're capable of producing the final document.
Couldn't agree more, Mike. Dave.
Right, quite interesting this, isn't it? I would have to say, I will say that I do think there's a lot of good sense in this strategy. Can see where you're coming from in many places, but also good points being made all round the table as well with regard to how things can be strengthened. I've got a question and some comments on the energy area, interestingly. So firstly, with the question in Pillar 4, it's got about revitalising our town centres. I particularly wish to check that will that include our small towns as well. And I couldn't help but sort of reflect on the language being used, revitalise, and sort of saying that, the town centres need to become vibrant. But my feeling about the small town where I live, Wiveliscombe, is it's fairly vibrant already. It's got some, well-established, important businesses, and new ones keep popping up when little gaps appear, but most of the very few gaps appear. So I think there's something to note there, but where we do struggle is the infrastructure. Our transport, gosh, our parking is a problem and going to get worse. Broadband. So somewhere along here, the infrastructure, I feel, certainly for the area where I represent, needs to be reflected, and so a link in with planning is clearly important there. So it's a plea for the small towns and make sure that they're included in here, because they're providing plenty of employment and the infrastructure. So, and the second area was as I say, sort of on the energy front. So just looking in Pillar 1, where it's got tidal lagoon, which I'm very happy to see there. It could be a really great opportunity, but there is a lot of uncertainty about it, and it's longer term. But if it could happen, you know, I'm absolutely there to support it. So keep it there. But do notice it has got those sort of characteristics, and potentially though there is studies in the past have suggested that is a fairly high cost as well. So can it be done at a lower cost, and probably has to be part of a program, not just one. But anyway, you know, I'm very keen to see it as a possible development area, but wonder how soon it may be able to deliver unless it gets real government backing behind it. And that sort of is linked to probably my even stronger thought on this, though, is that what we've not mentioned is the proven and the low cost energy sources which we need. And as just been mentioned, there's solar and wind. We know, you know, they're proven, they're commercial, and we're sort of, you know, we've put a lot of investment into high cost, expensive ones. So so as a plea that can it also, and my feeling is this should probably be part of the bedrock. So solar, wind and storage, you know, all are increasingly proven, and showing their worth. But I didn't see a hook for them in here. So please, can that be added in? And linked to that is retrofit. So insulating our housing and properties, installing heat pumps. These need to be, and will be, major industries which need to be everywhere, including in Somerset. So they should be part of the bedrock, maybe, or are they? I wasn't quite sure which pillar they might go under. Maybe pillar 3. So business startup and scale ups. You know, this should be an open door to scaling up and a new investment in employing people here. So I really think that needs an explicit hook where you can clearly see it in the pillars that we've got. Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'll probably ask a supplementary question at the end if it's not covered by someone else. Sam, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think they're all very valid points, aren't they? And I think there's areas where we can tweak the wording and approach to reflect those comments.
Mike Rigby.
Thanks. Just very quickly, Chair. I'll also make the point that I think Councillor Mansell has raised some interesting issues there, but all of those will also be covered in the local plan as well. I think that's probably the key document for us, in as much as wind and solar in particular are very viable forms of energy now, probably don't need a lot of support from us as a council to get them going, unlike the tidal lagoon. But we'll make sure that there's appropriate support in the local plan to enable those in a way that previous, particularly government level policies have blocked.
And if I may interject, allow me to update you all on the fact that the UK grid is now running on 31% solar, 16% wind, and 11% nuclear, 58% zero carbon as we speak. So I think the idea of building on that and having other offset industries is a useful one. I've got Alan Bradford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to hear Bridgewater was mentioned just now, but right over there. Thank you for the presentation, by the way. Thank you. I'm going to say that without the planning system being right, you can get no growth anywhere. That's why Sedgemoor, you look at the area around, it was second to none. And when the district councils amalgamated, you all know the financial state was in. It was there, way above anybody else. I'm going to say that at the moment things take too long. You can go to the planning system, and 2 years later, you're still waiting. And there's people on this committee perhaps in business, and they know what the costs are. Costs are going up everywhere and all the rest of it. I'm sat in the planning committee at Sedgemoor, been there for 18 years. I know what I'm talking about. And a lot of those things around Sedgemoor I've been involved in. but you had a fantastic setup in there. It never used to take too long. They got on with it. I know it's early days yet regarding Somerset Council, and hopefully things will come like that, but I can never see it because there's too much red tape, too much bumps you've got to get over today to get things done. And if you really want growth and prosperity, you've got to speed the planning system up. Because a lot of people are going to walk away and they're going to say it ain't worth messing about with, because costs go up 30% sometimes within 2 years. You've got your solicitors to pay, your land agents and everywhere else, and you put it back in. Then it's delayed for another 6 months, back in another 6 months, or it might not come to committee at all for another 6 months. I'm glad we've always had an agreement on that since we went to the Oval that day, remember? And you told me I was in the wrong party. You did, yeah. I remember it very clearly. And I told you I'm in the party of common sense and getting on with it. And that's how I've lived my life. So really, if you get all those things right, then growth and prosperity comes with it all. And regarding Hinkley Point, it has gone on far too long. It's brought a great number of assets to the area, etc., but also it brings us problems, housing in particular in Bridgewater. It really has. And I would think that the number of solar panels going up and number of solar farms going on locally, that you're going to see the price of Hinkley Point power go up a lot more yet, because the figures ain't going to start stacking up. That's all I'm going to say. I could talk about farming for hours.
Alan,
we're not going to.
You stole my thunder.
But thank you. I thought it was worth getting the point in. That's all right. I'm speaking from experience. You can't beat it, and you can't buy it. That's another thing.
Are you finished? I can't hear myself interrupting. I was. You stole my thunder. I was going to say the Labour government would probably agree with you on the planning issue, but yeah, and planning. Well, we need the staffing, don't we, to get through the amount of planning we're having to do. So I'm going to move on to Marcus Kravitz, please.
Yeah, I don't know quite where to start really. Great document. And unlike the one that I presented for Somerset West and Taunton, I can actually understand the wording in it, which is fantastic. I agree with Peter, agree with Andy, agree with Alan on many things. In fact, you might have stolen my thunder on the planning issue. But I mean, I think particularly it was in Pillar 5, I think I looked at as well. And I looked at Pillar 5 and thought, well, trouble is we can have an economic development strategy. But actually a lot of it, and we talked about party of common sense there, a lot of that we could be doing now. You don't need a strategy. You don't need a strategy to tell me that, we need to talk about social mobility. Then we talk about social mobility. We talk about transport. Well, let's talk about physical mobility. You still can't get a bus from Minehead to Bridgewater. It's just nonsense. You don't need a document. You don't need an economic development strategy to tell you that. It's just common sense. Yeah. Bridgewater, streets paved with gold. I'm a big Bridgewater fan. It's got soul, Bridgewater. So's North Petherton, obviously. But then you look at the little things and tourism, and we talked about dog walking. Well, do you know Blenheim Gardens Park? You can't take a dog in Blenheim Gardens Park in Minehead. And there's a huge debate on it. Why is that? Well, someone better speak to. Let's still our park for the next few months, maybe. As I said, I don't know where to start, but I've just suddenly realised I've only got 2 years as a councillor left. Is it 2 years? Yeah. So I better make a start somewhere, I suppose. No, I'm not keeping. Trust me, I'm not keeping going. I'm only here now under false pretences, and here it wasn't on mic. We'll talk about that later. We talk about young people, and I agree with Andy what you talk about the I can't say the word, but the threat of young people and old people and older population. Well, it is an absolute threat. I'm not worried about young people. I'm not worried about young people leaving. I'll kick mine out. Go away, leave West Somerset, see the world. Unfortunately, one of them is now in Cambodia. But the problem we've got is that you can build all those houses in Bridgewater, which we know we need, but unless they're council houses and unless they have local needs assessment, who's going to buy them? Be people from Birmingham, people from the southeast. How old will they be? Well, about 60, taking early retirement. Yeah, they're going to come here. I mean, I was in the Avenue in Minehead the other night, just as a cinema was kicking out, because we have a cinema now. But of course, I'm 56 years old.
and I was the youngest person in the street, because all the people coming out of the cinema were all in the 70s. It was just fascinating. And it's like, where's the future? So until and I'm not saying that's a problem, but I'm talking about the future. And David said about a vibrant with Eliscum. Well, it might be vibrant to you and me, but it's not if you're 25. You only had to look at the palaver we had at a local licensing panel for a 3 o'clock license for a pub, which was across the road for another one with a 3 o'clock license that never opens till 3 o'clock, only opens till 11 o'clock. You'd think the world was ending in Minehead when that came along. It was just nonsense. Can I say, yeah, their appeal time's up now, so they can't quote me on that. So it's that basic, and we talk about, Alan talked about planning. Well, let's talk about adult education. How's that going? You know, you talk about all those opportunities of people. I think it was Dawn. I'm agreeing with you, Dawn. Talk about mothers who want to retrain, and it's disgraceful. I'd just like to point out it is disgraceful that you're the only woman on this committee, and I had noticed as well, actually. So, but you talk about adult education. Where's that going? We've already mentioned Buster Bridgewater, but I'll mention it again because it's always worth a couple of mentions. M5, well, let's be honest, I was having a chat with someone the other day. I remember the M5 being 2 lanes. I am that old. And I remember it was originally 2 lanes when I used to come to Somerset after Birmingham. Was that right? I'm looking at the more experienced councillors in the group. Is it wide enough? Probably not. There's a problem. You don't need an economic development strategy to tell you the M5 needs to be wider just for Friday and Saturday night. And then let's talk about small businesses. We always talk about the big businesses. We talked about big data and big AI and all that. I remember all those words and all those other things that were mentioned before. But talk about small businesses. Yeah, talk about what they need to survive with all the costs that are increasing now. And you talk about, you know, what was it? Nation of shopkeepers. Oh, the irony. But you talk about the planning system. Well, I'd actually say it's not just, you know, the planning system is broken from the bottom up. I've been saying, you know, you look at parish councils, you look at town councils. Some of them, I'd argue, have been infiltrated slightly by NIMBYism. I would also, yeah, and then of course that reflects back. But then it's not just this planning system that's broken. You could overhaul that. You've still got a planning department that, as Alan said, 6 months. I know someone who's been waiting 6 months would be quick if they could get 6 months. I mean, it's just, things cost money, even the planning fees now. I mean, we all know we need the planning fees because we all know that we need a council that's self-sustaining. But if you're a small business, suddenly you think, oh, I've got to go and put a sign up. Oh, I need planning permission for that. Oh, that sign's going to cost me what? Oh, £2,000 that sign might cost me. And then all of a sudden, oh no, by the way, your planning fee. Oh, well, you need planning fees, so that's architect fees. So that's going to be 500 quid, even if he does it on the cheap. And all you need to do is put a sign. Then you put your planning fees up, another £500. Yeah, before you know it, you spent £5,000 to just change a sign. It's clearly bonkers. And then what happens is your NIMBY town council doesn't like the colour, and then you'd end up dealing with conservation departments who might not like the colour. I mean, who is anyone to tell a small business what the colour should be? You know, just because of where it's located, it might not even be in the conservation area. I remember once outside the conservation area being refused planning, the conservation officer not wanting solar panels. As it happens, it turns out it was permitted development, so it was all okay. But if it hadn't been permitted development, outside the conservation area, you had one person telling you that you couldn't have solar power. It's just, you know, until we solve those problems, I don't know where we are. And we talk about tourism again, and I mean, obviously, you know, we can all come from beautiful Somerset, but as it happens, I live in the best part of the most beautiful part of the beautiful Somerset. I'm closer to Wales than I am to some parts of this county. And it is stunning. But then all of a sudden you find out you've got, you know, how can I say it politely? I've had messages recently, people complaining about some of the more better things this council does, and maybe some of the more challenging residents from Somerset suddenly being in Minehead. And suddenly everybody's up in arms about it. So you're trying to, on one hand, you're trying to create a physically more inviting and prettier place, and at the other hand, and you're thinking, well, do you know what? Nobody really knows where West Somerset is, so we'll stick everybody there and keep them out of the way. So business environment, we talked about that. Encouraging businesses to decarbonise, we talked about that. You encourage them to decarbonise and then you can't do it. And I've got personal experience on that twice actually. And then barriers to barriers to participation. We could deal with that. We don't need a strategy to deal with that. We should just get on and do it. Sort out why the social mobility problem in West Somerset, which is no longer the lowest in the country, apparently it's somewhere in Dorset, is it Bridport, I think. Why are we not solving that? We've been talking about it for 5-6 years. Yeah, we know what the problems are. We need to get them, we need to find them work, not necessarily in West Somerset, but at least allow them to get out of West Somerset for a day to do some work and come back. Yeah, I know a young lad who's doing really well. His work isn't in West Somerset, but he lives in West Somerset and loves it. And we do genuinely need to deal with what the lack, I think. Yeah, there's an opportunity now with EDF, and I think, and I know I wasn't involved the first time, but I was probably involved the second time. I think we might have had not the wool pulled over our eyes, I think, because I think we're too clever for that, but I think we were. I think we maybe could have done slightly better with the mitigation we got. We talk about tourism, we talk about visitor centres, and we talk about Visit Exmoor and Visit Somerset, and then all of a sudden we load them up with KPIs, and they can't function. We're actually, why are we not finding the money from somewhere? And I do think there's a big opportunity with EDF now that they need to, what they gave. I mean, what Hinckley gave the Quantock Hills, was it £400,000? That's the equivalent to me building a house and giving them a breeze block. Probably less, actually. It's probably half a breeze block, when you look at the cost. So we need to make sure that, the amount of mitigation, the amount of disruption that they've caused, that we need to make sure that we get our fair share there, and that gets spread out locally to what can make a difference and make a difference with the legacy. And tourism is the legacy. Sorry, my time.
Yeah, I'm going to wind you up.
You're going to wind me up. I'm only getting warmed up, Chair. As I said, I've got 2 years left. I'm not going to waste these 2 years. But I think, there is a perception problem with Somerset. I don't know if anybody ever watches or listens to Call Jonathan Pye. Yeah. Well, did you know that Jonathan Pye worked on the Somerset County Gazette? I know he's not a real person, but if you listen to his latest episode, he took the Somerset County Gazette as an example of how bad his journalism was when he first started out, which I thought was quite ironic, but then he went to work for Russia Today, so that was better. So there's my little bit there. But I do think my concern with this, in summary, winding up, is it's a great strategy. I know we need a strategy, but I think there's things that we would override it anyway, which is the real big national infrastructure stuff. And then I think there's the basics, which we don't need to wait till this strategy gets finished. We don't need to wait till we got a new planning, local plan to finish. We can be getting on with it now and actually changing people's lives. And a bus to Bridgewater. Oh, and certainly, sir. Oh, can I just finally, it's been mentioned 3 or 4 times. It's in my declarations of interest. I used to be involved in a tidal energy company. It is still existence. It's not this company. But if anybody wants to look at all the files on my Google Drive, they are remarkably similar. Thank you.
Lots to take on there. Is there anything you want to come back on?
I guess probably the key point is perhaps to say that we absolutely are getting on with things as a service area regardless. So I think the strategy is important in bringing together all of that evidence base and collective vision and priorities into one place and getting buy-in and support for it. But it doesn't mean that as a service area we're doing nothing in the meantime. And by the contrary, I think on all those priorities there is activity underway, either directly by the council and or with our partners as well. So I think just to reassure on that point that we are absolutely getting on with supporting prosperity in Somerset in the meantime.
Yeah, I was going to mention the low social mobility in West Somerset as well, which was a report that came out about 5 years ago. And the questions you asked, Marcus, we haven't had the answers for really. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of really good points there from Marcus. I'll pick up on a couple of them. Alan also mentioned the speed with which planning applications are progressing through the system, or the lack thereof, and we're fully aware of the fact that the planning process is not operating as we would want it to. We do have now resources as a result of the budget to put in 9 additional planners, senior planners, but we also have recruitment and retention difficulties because frankly we don't pay enough. We've now kind of cracked that particular nut with a authorization to spend a reasonable sum of money on recruitment and retention bonuses. At the moment, the private sector pays planners a lot more money than local authorities do. And then if you look at the southwest of England and our neighbours, all the other councillors are paying planners more than we do. So we're kind of the back of the pack being picked off by the wolves. So the goal now is very quickly to deal with the pay issue so that we're not back at the pack, we're kind of middle of the pack and someone else is getting picked off. That's what we're going to have to do. That's what we are doing over the summer. And I would hope that by the end of the summer, there'll be significant visible progress in terms of the speed with which planning applications are being determined. The other thing I'll just pick up on briefly is Hinkley Point. I think Marcus is right. I don't think as a collection of councils, I don't think we got enough mitigation out of EDF at the start. I don't think we got enough with Workforce Uplift 1. I'm going to make damn sure that we do with Workforce Uplift 2, and we're in the middle of that now. And I'm not sure if did you mention the bus between Bridgewater and Minehead? I think you might have missed that bit.
Yes, but please don't palm me off with that free bus for Hinkley Point, on which we need a scheduled service. You need to be able to be 18, you need to be 18 years old and be able to get a job in Bridgewater. No, you can get there without having some nice middle class parents that can buy an insured car for you.
I've got 3 more speakers and I'm going to draw a line under this. First one, I'm going to call in Helen Kay because she's been waiting a long time online. Helen.
All right. Thank you. Some people have already raised some of the points I wanted to make, but I did have a slightly different spin on it. Taking the last thing that Mike said first, I was thinking about how we could get local, local people employed when we have big developments. So, for example, that workforce uplift that we get with the Hinkley development, could that be extended out when we've got large estates being built? For example, at the moment, we have to have a condition when we've got a big housing estate being built that says we want you to employ at least, I don't know, 50% local people so that they don't bring their people in from Bristol or Salisbury or somewhere else to do the work. Could that actually be something? Could the economic development team please put some pressure on the local plan policy team to make sure that goes into, it becomes a policy that we ask for that in all major developments, so we can employ local people. On the retrofit point, at the moment, yes, we need to tie that into the climate strategy that Dave Mansell mentioned that. And again, at the moment, we've got quite 2 large retrofit courses being run at 2 of our colleges, but it shouldn't just be delivered through colleges. I had a meeting with, I think it was Persimmon, one of the directors of Persimmon, and what they were doing is that they were training their youngsters to do retrofit skills as well, as at the same time as the new build. But what they were finding is they would train them and then they would leave after 2 years because there's such a shortage of retrofit skills in the larger economy. But is there a way that we can somehow work with employers to also bring in those retrofit skills? With the farming thing that Henry Hobhouse mentioned, I think that was also something I noticed, that farming should feature more. And in fact, I've already written to one of the, I think it was James Diwali who wrote back to me about this already. And I was asking not just about the farming tying into the local nature recovery strategy, but can it tie into also, again, our preparedness for climate change so that we encourage farmers to improve our food resilience, so that we're producing more. So, for example, we up the market garden sector, so rather than importing lots of salad and whatever, that we have more market gardening locally, so we have more food resilience locally. Is that something else that could go into this plan? I don't know if it's appropriate. I also was pleased to see that regarding infrastructure, you're trying to influence the companies like Southern and Scottish Electric, I can't remember what they're called now, but the ones that around grid capacity. I'm pleased to see that you're working on that. I wasn't quite sure what you meant by green infrastructure. You mentioned something about working on green infrastructure, and I wanted to know what you meant by that. And again, you said something around the preparedness for climate change. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. This is very much my angle, and you won't agree with this, but I've said this before, and I've said it either in this meeting or at one of these committee meetings, or I've said it in a member briefing, is that as somebody that's, and I know that I'm the maverick here, as somebody that's opposed to nuclear power, I actually find it slightly irritating that nuclear power is called a green technology or a green energy. It's not a decarbonised. It's not decarbonised. It's I've read somewhere that there's so much carbon input just in terms of the cement that has to be poured, so much embodied energy in a nuclear power station. It takes something like 10 or 15 years of operation before it actually starts to pay back more energy than was invested in building it. So it kind of irritates me to see that as being under the same bracket as clean energy. I agree that the battery storage is and that other things are, but I'd just like to see in terms of the language in this strategy. I'd prefer it if it was, green. You could say green energy and nuclear power, so that you separate those two out. I know that I probably will be overridden on that point, but I just want to register that again, that I don't agree with that being bracketed as green energy. And when it comes to the data centres, again, looking at net zero, you say that you want to be net zero, but we've had a discussion about the logistics in this meeting of how we're actually going to be able to power those data centres, and how much it's going to cost. And we're looking at cost, but we're supposed to be trying to do something here that's net zero. Data centres are never going to be net zero, are they? Unless we put solar panels all over them, on the sides of them and the top of them, and at the same time. So I think that's nearly everything. Oh, the one last thing, which was that Peter C mentioned about distinguishing different parts of the county. I've also had a correspondence with one of the economic development team already about this, is that there does already seem to be some detail on all of the old district areas, if you actually start to look at the detail in the plan, except Mendip area, the old Mendip area. There doesn't seem to be any detail really about the old Mendip area. And it's about looking at what's special about that area. I suppose it is one of the smallest, it is the smallest old district. And I would say in Frome, it's obviously creative industries and SMEs, lots of sort of consultancy type small businesses, art, but that's artists, but that's the same for the whole county. And I am wondering if the creative industries have been given a big enough platform in this strategy, because that is something that small scale collectively Somerset is good at. Okay, thank you.
Again, a lot of points there. I don't know if there's any one thing you want to come back on, or any couple of things, do so, Samantha.
Yes, just on the local plan connections, we are absolutely committed to working with planning colleagues. So we've had kind of monthly meetings to make sure that there is that connectivity between the local plan and economic development strategy and work as well. So I think that bit around local employment for major developments, we can absolutely pick up collectively on how we best address that across the two bits of policy work. I guess just a little bit as well about the Mendip. I think it is a bit to think about a bit more maybe in that local distinctiveness pillar as to how we pull across a bit more clearly some of those kind of more local dimensions in line with the number of comments that we've had from the committee around that kind of dimension to the work.
Thank you very much. I've got two more. That's Matthew Martin, Norman Cavill, and that's it. I'm drawing the line under it there. We're running late now, so I'm sorry, chaps, but if you can be brief, I'd be grateful.
I will be brief, thank you. Well, I think I'll be brief. This report plays nicely into two areas of which I have experience, and I'm afraid that I'm going to inject a darker note with an edge of frustration and anger at the florid words that are in the report. I appreciate the report had to happen, and most of it is okay. The first part comes from this omnipresent idea of Somerset jobs for the young. I've been banging on about this for years and years and years, and I have been trying to retain and create jobs for young people in Somerset. I tried it a couple of years ago through the UK SPF, and it was spectacularly unsuccessful, with the hurdles and barriers that were put in place or became apparent, or which were unwilling to be worked around. It was astonishing, and it became somewhat of a thing of interest for me just to watch how difficult it was for me, a Somerset councillor, to try and get hold of people to do something with the UK SPF. It was wonderful to look at an exercise in things not happening. My problem with young people in Somerset is that they're going away. And the reason for that is, well, largely for people like me. I came down from the southeast, bought my southeast money and bought a house that nobody else could afford to buy in the local area. Now, curiously enough, I couldn't afford to buy it. The house prices in Mere and West Hay have gone up because of the gentrification. Now we got money coming in, as we were told earlier, from everywhere else apart from Somerset. Nobody local can buy the houses that I bought. It's ridiculous. Now, why is that a problem? It's not a problem for me. I've got a lovely little cottage out on the levels. Thank you for that. It's great. Unfortunately, we're seeing in Somerset now the problem that they've seen in Italy, Spain and France for the last 15 years, and that is villages dying. We have, I've told this story many times to many of you, including to Samantha. In France, which I have a particular connection, you can buy villages, not houses in villages, you can buy villages. Because what's happened is people like me have gone there towards retirement, bought the houses up, raising the price of houses. The young people not being able to buy the houses have all left, and the old people have died. Happens to the best of us. And as a consequence, the village just falls out of use. We're seeing that on Somerset now. We're on the edge now. And I'm very aware that I'm part of the problem. I came into West Hay and did exactly that. Now, West Hay is full of people like me with 1.5 farms. One farm that's sort of working, the other farm, I call it a half farm. Unfortunately, it's not really a farm anymore because the farmer killed himself. Again, these things are happening. We do need to retain jobs in Somerset for young people. If we do not retain jobs for young people, Somerset will go. It will. We can look at the continent for seeing that. So yes, I'm interested in this report. Having my experience, I'm not confident about it. I'm sorry, Mr. Hickson, Ms. Seddon, all those that have worked on it. I will be watching this with interest because I'm not confident. Our ability to put florid words around a problem is good and noble. But unless we get spades dug in and work being done, not at Clark's, not at Leonardo, but in the rest of Somerset. Somerset's huge. Vast tracts of land which are rapidly becoming useless. Farmers can't afford to farm them. Nobody else wants to use them until some idiot like me comes in and buys up the farmhouse. This is the situation we find ourselves in. Warehousing and data centres in Somerset, is that really the best we can do? Is that what we can offer the young people in Somerset? That if you grow up here, we'll offer you a bright future in a warehouse or Clark's Village or retail. Is this it? We wonder why our kids are leaving, why our kids are going to Sheffield and Birmingham and London. I would. There's nothing else here. You get to 21 years old and you look around you and think, what's my future going to be? There's a job in Clark's Village. Thanks for your help. Well, I'm glad I put 56 grand in university fees. We wonder why they're going. This is a problem for now. Artificial intelligence. We need to stop bandying this word around. Now, when I was at university a long time ago, my focus was artificial intelligence at Sussex. When there was 2 of us, there was Sussex University and there was MIT. And we were the top AI people in the world. Everybody's talking about AI. 2 things about that. AI is useless and it will remain useless for a long time. So stop talking about AI as if it's this universal panacea. It's not. And it won't be. And I'm telling you that as a person that spent a lot of time working with it. And I'm still interested. All the stuff that I worked on, even the programming languages that I worked on, they're finished now, they're gone. But the philosophy behind it remains. AI, as we see it now, isn't AI, it's pattern matching. So let's stop talking about AI as this wonderful Oz solution that's going to come in and sort everything out. But if we do take that route and we say AI is going to fix everything for us, brilliant. What are we going to need? Helen, we're going to need data centers. All right. I did that after I was at university. Installed networks. And there's a common trope in the IT world, and that is of the pilot of the future. A 747 or whatever the thing is nowadays, the biggest aeroplane, won't be flown by people anymore. You'll need one pilot and one dog. The pilot is there to feed the dog. The dog is there to make sure the pilot doesn't touch anything. And this is true. Yes, we can have a data center in Somerset, but it ain't going to give you any jobs. Because again, somebody like me would be there maintaining 100 servers, 1,000 servers. And the job of that one person will be to plug them back in again when somebody at offsite turns them off. Because they won't be managed in Somerset. They'll be managed in Singapore, London, Birmingham, or the universities. Data centers aren't the panacea. Data centers are massive, massive warehouses full of thousands of computers that just suck up power like nobody's business. And we are about to fall into another of the problems that have hit this country over the last 400 years. We're calling it AI. It's not AI for a start, right? But even if it were AI, all we are doing is training computers, if we were to go down that route, which I disagree with, we're training computers to take over the jobs of the people that are working here. Every time you use AI, or what's called AI, to do a simple task online because somebody at Google is giving you a free service, you're training somebody to do your job. So I'm telling the officers now that are probably watching this online, turn off the Microsoft tools that you are training to take over your jobs. Do I make myself abundantly clear? AI first is not AI. Second is not the universal panacea, it's pattern matching. Third, it is going to take over your job. If you want your job in 7 years' time, turn it off. And that's coming from me, Councillor Matt Martin, that spent a lot of time looking at it. And to sum this up, thank you, Chair, for being patient. We in Somerset are aiming low. Retail warehousing data centres are not what we should be giving our young people. And if we don't give them something better, they're going to go somewhere else. And villages like my village of West Hay, all the other beautiful little lovely villages that idiots like me have come in and bought a house in because we could afford it with our Southeast money, are going to die. Look at France, look at Italy, look at Spain. We need a university destination in Somerset, a university destination, a proper one, not a university college. As proud as I am of our university college, it's not good enough. We need to stop looking at the 5-year election cycle, and we need to start looking at a 25-year solution, start building a university now to keep young people here. If we don't, in my dotage, I'm going to be sitting in my garden, done up on brandy by 10 o'clock because everybody else in the village has died. Thank you for your patience. I feel strongly about this. I will be willing to talk to anybody about this afterwards because I've been banging on about this for years, but I'm afraid my lack of confidence is palpable. I will be watching closely. Thank you very much.
Taking those points, I'm not asking for a response yet. I wait to the end. I'm going to come to Norman.
Okay, I can be comparatively brief. I believe your main drivers that we're failing at the moment is the small and medium-sized businesses. It's down to what Marcus has been talking about and others, and that is the planners. Plus, I'm dealing with businesses at the moment that want to, if you like, expand their profitability, employ more, grow. They cannot get a planning permission through. It's not just the planning permission that's stopping them or the planner that's stopping them. It is the fact that when they get through one stage, they're being asked, because somebody different is involved in, to resubmit reports in a different manner again. It reminds me of what DEFRA and co were doing with farming. You put all your animals in year groups for them, fill in one set of forms, next week you get another set of forms, they want them in 6 months, sessions, and so on. And that is what seems to be happening with the planning side of it. I can give you individual examples, as I suspect you all can as well. And it's quite simple. You get through planning committee, You've then got to get it signed off. Now, that is another, if you like, Herculean effort in itself. I've got planning applications that on my desk that was signed off, if you like, by the planning committee in December a year ago. They are still stuck at the legal section, getting everything signed off there. The longest one I've got is nearly 5 years now. Now, it's crazy. Businesses that I'm dealing with, some are giving up, some are changing tact and scaling down labour, etc., because they say they can't afford it anymore. They've got to change their business model. And it's all because we haven't got our house in order. We need to streamline the whole process right through, not just the planning department, but everything to do with the planning department and through the legal section before it gets signed off. Once you've got that and business can move ahead, it's great. But the 5 year ago scheme was several £1 million worth. That's over double the price now. And quite frankly, I know the situation they're in. When it eventually comes through, I'm sure it won't be done. It'll be sold off to somebody else to mitigate or make the minimum loss for them. Other businesses that I'm dealing with at the moment are saying, no, we won't comply. The easiest one is in farming, for instance. As an example, somebody goes out of dairy, you could have the phosphate units from that quite easily. But no businessman in his right head is going to go and offer that to you simply because you've got to give an open checkbook to our legal solicitors for them to do it. And they'll say, we can't risk that. They're all there facing you as barriers to economic development. But what you need to do is to get those drivers going, and to do that, we must streamline everything right the way through.
Thank you. Right. Would you like to have a final say on any of those things? Paul is happy to come in if you. There's a lot to take in. I accept.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to make a kind of overview comment, in as much as it's come up at several points that it's all very well having a strategy. What are we doing as well? And Samantha touched on that earlier on in her responses, but just to reiterate about that point, in the day-to-day, the council as a whole, the Economic Development Service as part of it, is addressing on a number of fronts the points that we touched on in the discussion and that are touched on in the strategy. Councillor Martin's passion about the needs of young people heard very clearly. We as a service work very closely with our education service. There is good work going on collaboratively between the two parts of the council. Obviously, we work very closely with our further education college partners as well on a number of programmes and initiatives. Could we do more? I'm sure we could. Resources from government, in addition, would be great as well. We see a challenged environment in terms of the level of skills funding available for Somerset. We'll keep the pressure on regarding that. Thank you.
Okay. This is almost impossible to summarise, but I'm going to just add a few points of my own very quickly. With regard to gravity, we're looking at a workforce of 4,000 people coming on board. We are not going to be able to provide that from within Somerset. Birth rates are falling, even in the long run. We're not going to be able to do that. That means a lot of people are going to be coming into the county, I imagine. And that will involve quite a lot of housing, and that will involve a lot of planning. So I echo the sentiments about the planning issues and getting things through quickly. I believe we're due to get a new junction on the M5 to service gravity. Is that right? Yeah. In which case, we need to be looking at spin-off industries, and I'm not talking about data centres, possibly distribution and other things that do feed in or feed off things like gravity. And taking Matthew's point about education, I do think Somerset has been greatly disadvantaged by not having a university. Where you find the means and how you actually address that is not an easy question to answer, but I agree with you entirely, because we send our young people out of the county all the time. And yeah, that's a summary of my points. So I'm going to stop there. And I think we need to move on very quickly. We're going to run half an hour over in this meeting, and we're due to have a quick break. And I need one for 5 minutes. So I'm going to call one now. Sorry, Mike, but we'll start at 10:02. Management for place-based risks. A371 case study. Mike O'Dowd-Jones to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief on this, as I'm conscious of time. So I was asked to look at how we deal with risk management as a service and as a council, and there's a particular issue of a failing embankment on the A371 near Castle Carey that has kind of triggered the question, I guess, really about how we deal with risk management generally. So I just wanted to talk you through it. Helpfully also, I spoke to the council's risk manager, who wasn't able to make it today, but just to find out about what's going on corporately. And there is a revised risk framework for the council as a whole going to the executive board on the 12th of May, where the kind of refreshed approach will be being considered and approved. So this is a kind of emerging picture. And so I've borrowed a few bits of information from the corporate work on this. So essentially how the council deals with or is planning to deal with risk going forward is to have various layers of risk management at the strategic level, tactical level and operational level. And there is a system being put in place called IdeaGen, which is a system where risks can be logged and can be transparently viewed by a range of people across the council, as well as other audit actions and those sorts of things. And so just in terms of the strategic risks for the council, I've just pulled across a quick snapshot of what's in the system at the moment for the council's strategic risks. And it is things like climate change impacts, statutory responsibilities, economic growth, which we've just been discussing, financial sustainability, etc., fraud. So there's a lot of very, very high level strategic risks there at the top level for the whole council, which are being viewed and managed. And the process for kind of reviewing and understanding what's happening with risk across the council is set out here. So various levels of bodies who will be reviewing and discussing risks once the risk register is fully up and running. The likes of Audit Committee, Scrutiny, Corporate and Resources Committee, etc. And then, so those will be looking at strategic risk and also looking at the highest scoring operational risks. So we have a risk scoring matrix which looks at the likelihood of something happening and the impact of it happening. And those that are red risks, i.e. they are both likely to happen and would have a big impact, will be the sorts of things that are raised with the higher level committees as strategic, alongside the strategic risks. And then as we go down the hierarchy, directorate management teams will be considering risk, looking at the service-based information, and then operational teams will be looking regularly at project risks, which won't necessarily be floating up to the top. If things are being managed well, there'll be an awful lot of risks that are logged that are being well managed and don't need to be escalated upwards. In terms of my own service, infrastructure and transport, we've had a long-standing process in place along those lines anyway. It has been largely paper-based, but nonetheless follows the same principles. So we have a process of project teams and project boards meeting monthly. Our portfolios of work are pulled together on a monthly basis through a portfolio meeting where we consider risks, and anything necessary is escalated up to the higher directorate level processes. I think the critical thing for me is the monthly portfolio meeting where we pull this all together and meet with the portfolio holder to discuss any issues. I just wanted to show you what these look like, the paper-based systems. I've deliberately made them small enough so that you can't read what's on them, because I didn't feel we should necessarily go into a massive debate about the wording of all of these things. But just to show you what they look like, so the example of the A371 embankment is relevant to our highways structures team. So this is what the risk management looks like for the structures team. There's a detailed risk log, which is a big spreadsheet on the bottom right-hand corner, which has all sorts of risks around structures, and then that goes into a monthly highlight report, which is considered by the portfolio group, including me and the portfolio holder. So any red risks are escalated to that, and then that forms part of an overall summary on the right-hand side at the top, which is all of our programs and projects as a directorate. And just to note that on the structures risk log, there is a risk around landslips and embankment failures affecting the highway, and noting that they are increasingly happening more rapidly due to extreme weather conditions. So we, as a service, we have an eye on the fact that this is happening more often. And we are considering what we do about that in terms of whether we put aside specific elements of our budget to deal with that increasingly, and what our most rapid delivery methods would be to tackle issues when they arise. And then on the highlight report, which is a monthly report, you can see that the landslip at Ansford, Castle Carey, is on the highlight report and has been for a little while. So we do have an eye on it as a service. So IdeaGen is going to be really good for transparency. I think a lot of this stuff is paper-based and it's quite hidden. So whilst things are well managed, I think for people outside of that immediate governance to see what's happening has been quite difficult. So IdeaGen will help us get very transparent about these things. So I've just given you a quick snapshot here of the infrastructure and transport high-level risks that are already in IdeaGen. The likes of things like the bus network being significantly reduced by commercial withdrawals, for instance, having a well-maintained fleet to grip the roads in the winter, that sort of thing. So that's the kind of level of risk that's in there at the moment. We have, following discussion in the last couple of weeks, put in a new area within the system, which is for escalated project risks. So I think this is where the likes of the A371 scheme will probably go, in that we know someone's raised something and we want to keep a particular eye on it. So we have an area where we can put in particular escalated issues and then make sure that those are monitored more transparently. So that's only just been put in place, but will be really helpful, I think, in terms of dealing with these sorts of issues. I also want to talk about briefly, just moving away from risk slightly, into how we deal with issues on the highway. So the A371 example is it's more than a risk, it's happened. It's an issue. There has been a problem there in terms of the stability of the land. So I just thought it's worth going through briefly how we deal with these sorts of issues and how we manage them. So an issue is identified, and that can come through a range of channels. We have planned inspections on the highway every day. We've also got the contact centre and online reporting where issues are raised to us by the public. And I would always urge people to use the online reporting if they do spot anything. I'll put the web link in there, but that goes directly into our highway systems. So there's a record straight away then that there's an issue on the highway. We will go out and inspect it and assess the risk. And then there are various actions we can take. If it's not a safety issue, then we might not take any immediate action. If there is a safety issue and there's a straightforward solution, we can issue a repair order. We might monitor the situation, and the frequency of monitoring would be based on what's set out in our risk manual at the moment. We often have daily inspections on certain matters because they are things we really need to keep an eye on every day. And then if it's a complex structural issue, and this is where the A371 issue comes in, it is quite complex. There isn't an immediate straightforward solution. Then we need to do investigations, undertake surveys, etc. Then design a solution and implement it, which can take some time. And while we're doing that, we will be monitoring the situation on up to a daily basis. And then obviously we update our systems so that there's transparency in terms of what's happening. So hopefully you can see that there's a robust process in place once things have been raised and are in our systems. And then finally, the point around how members can have a risk considered. So I think hopefully what you can see is there's a lot of information knocking around, that there are lots of risks being considered and lots of different processes to manage them. But I think the point being raised was how can a member, if they see something out there that they consider to be a risk, how can they get that considered? So I think this will be something that comes up with the new system, but having discussed this with the council's risk manager, they feel at the moment the best process is for the member to approach the portfolio holder to raise the issue, or who can discuss it with the service director or the executive director, and then we can say, is this something that's already being monitored? Is it already in the system, or is it something new that we need to bring in? And then work out who it belongs to and who can take control of that. So I think this is the advice that I've got from the risk officer at the moment. So that was all I wanted to say. Hopefully that covers the main issues of concern. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any questions on that? Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mike, for that. I brought this up because I've had 6 landslides going onto the A371 from a bank which is owned by Somerset Council in the last 5 months. Those landslides have not actually hit a car or anything at the moment, but the next one may well do that. And the bank, the slippage is now 6 foot from the nearest house. I had no way of getting it on the county risk register, which is why I asked for this item to be brought here. We now have a system for members to ensure it's on the risk register, because at the end of the day, if somebody gets killed by another landslide on a main road in Somerset, the council is liable. Thank you again, Mike.
Marcus.
Thank you. Not worried about whether the council's liable. It'd be nice to know that we don't want to kill people. So, but yeah, I was on that because I feel a bit sorry for the portfolio holder, because the amount of, it must be almost like a full-time job, I think, having to deal with our inquiries when it comes to risks. I think it was, and I know earlier I had a little pop at parish councils, but one of the things they are good at is reporting highways issues, particularly as a lot of that, particularly out in rural areas. And I know it's on your risk register, Bonington Lane. Very pleased with that. Thank you, because it's in my patch. But it's that how quick we react to something being deemed a risk. For instance, there's another drain cover that's making an awful lot of noise, and how that time scale of it gets reported by whoever. And one of the frustrations I get with parish councils is they say, well, we've told highways that this is a problem and we haven't had back yet and everything else. And then I end up having to get involved, and not that I do very often, or I end up basically emailing the portfolio holder. But they do, that's one of the things the parish councils do feel, that they report the stuff. They obviously think it's more serious than maybe or think it's quite serious. It may or may not be serious, but it's that time scale of something actually happening. And I always say I don't get too much casework, but one of the most exciting moments this weekend was seeing that a drain cover was being replaced on a Friday. I think it might be on a Friday. It was a Thursday. So it's that time scale, and obviously who makes that decision where there's an immediate imminent danger to death. I always remember speaking to building control officer when he said to me once, he goes, is there immediate threat to life? He said, yes. I said, yes. He goes, well, do whatever you need to do and do it now. And it's just, how do we get to that point when it comes to a council rather than an individual who'll just get on with it?
Mike?
Yeah, so if you go looking back my flow chart earlier on, so the person who goes out and inspects the issue, the highway superintendent will take a judgment on the severity of the risk and then allocate it accordingly. So there's a highway inspection manual that sets out the various criteria, what we would think needs doing within 24 hours, what is safe enough to leave for a longer period. I think so. There's more routine things have very well established criteria and processes. I think that the more challenging things are the more complex issues, particularly around, we've had lots of issues around drainage and the land slips and those sorts of things which are more complex. We are looking at how we can get better information out to people about progress with those, because sometimes it can feel like a bit of a black hole on the more complex things. And we're also looking at delivery methods with Kia now. They've been in place for a year or so with us, and actually I think there's some more quick delivery routes that we can start to develop with Kia in terms of some of the more complex stuff, rather than going through a very linear design, procure, deliver process. So we're looking at that at the moment. Marcus.
Any other further questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Mike. And we can. Sorry to keep you. Oh, Councillor Kay's waving at me over the screen.
Yes. The other woman that comes regularly to this particular scrutiny meeting. Hello, again. I would love to be on this committee, by the way, but I have too many responsibilities locally to give it enough time. I just wanted to know about whether or not, it's a bit of a touchy issue maybe, when we were going through the budget process and we were talking about redundancies, we were quite often last year confronted with union reps standing outside the full council meetings, handing out leaflets saying that we would not be able to deliver half our services given the staff cuts, and that we were losing the people, especially middle management, that sort of knew the most, really. And I'm just wondering if this is one of the things that's on your risk register, that sort of like, the ability to actually be able to deliver some of the services. And obviously, as a Green councillor, the one that jumps out to me is the first one you've got there, the failure to prioritise and address climate change impacts, where we know that we've lost 10 staff and we're now down to 1, and I think it's been brought up to 2 again, though I do understand that this is something that's cross-cutting. But I'm thinking more really what the unions were more concerned about was, just things like, children's homes and social care and things like that. I'm just wondering, is that part of this on your risk register, that sort of overall delivery of services?
Yes, I'm sure it is. I've not taken the opportunity to dive into it, but I know there has been lots of discussion around that within the corporate leadership team. So I imagine that it is on the risk register. I can certainly take away an action to check, and there'll be obviously a wide range of actions in terms of dealing with that. And there was certainly a knowledge transfer process set up for people leaving the organisation to make sure that they do hand over their, insofar as possible, their knowledge as they move on. But yeah, I'm sure it is, but I can check.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Helen. And I hate to tell you this, but you can't be on this committee because there's already 2 of us from the same party. Anyway,
I'll swap places.
You can
with
swap.
Martin.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it on that question. So we move over to agenda item 9, items for information. Following items were circulated: task and finish Somerset Energy Investment Plan, officer response to committee request for report. Did you want to say anything on that, James?
No, I think all the information is in the information report. We do have Graham online as well, who's the author of the report, if there's any questions.
Any questions for anybody? Dave, good. I was a bit worried that Graham would have waited through the whole of this meeting online without anybody actually requiring his services.
I didn't want to disappoint Graham. Okay, well, thank you for the report. I'm still sort of collecting my thoughts. I had a series of points I'm still trying to sort of quickly work out, but let's see what comes out. So, okay, yeah, no, thank you for the report. I'm pleased. I can't help but say, it has taken a long time. We have waited over a year, but I'm again trusting lessons for the future have been learned from that. That said, with it taking so long, there's been quite a lot of change since we first made our request in relation to giving priority to some energy policies in the local plan, and so they could be, have early weight in the process. We have a new government, and we clearly have new policies as far as the as planning and the local plan is concerned. So the report we've had from Graham has been very helpful in outlining where it had got to, and I must admit, some of that was news to me. I hadn't picked it up. And one of the things it did was refer us to a report that went to the Planning and Transportation Subcommittee of the Executive on what's happening with the local plan. And that report didn't come to us. There was a briefing because this has already been mentioned. I must admit, I didn't quite get the full sense of quite what changes were going on from that briefing. And it is. I mean, it is worth looking at, and we've sort of mentioned it today. Let me see. So I should have got this better prepared. I think, oh damn, I've got it here somewhere. Anyway, I'll do it from memory. So, the national policy has changed as far as what local plans are going to do. And so what Graham said in this report and what was said to the subcommittee in February was that it's going to be strategic, the local plan, and that there's not going to be new development management policies, some of which we've been talking about earlier today. Now, actually, it's not planned to have new ones. It's going to be strategic. The way the local plan is happening is now very different to the reports that we've previously had, and it's driven by the national changes, clearly. And I must admit, I still haven't got my head fully round it. We will see where this goes. It also says in the February report that some of the current policies are going to be saved, which of course is interesting, given that we've got, I think it is 6 local plans we're building on for the different areas. So I must admit, I'm not fully understanding quite what this is going to look like. And now what we've got also from the report here, we've got as far as incorporating the climate emergency concerns and getting early weight to energy policies, we're told it's likely to include these in the draft policies that come out in the next spring. So I'm obviously very interested to see those policies. I'm a little bit worried that it says it's likely to include. I'm not looking for likely. I'm looking for it will include. So so if a little bit more reassurance could be given, and I hope it's not just likely. I hope it's a will. Okay, that's probably the main points I wish to raise. Apart from what I should also say that this all comes from the energy plan, which this committee actually approved and recommended over a year ago now. It was March last year, and it is now going to executive in June. So good to finally see that, and clearly it's been a challenging year for the council over the last year. We can't ignore that, so I will just be satisfied that it's getting there finally now, and thank you, Graham, for the information you've given us. But yeah, so they're likely to include. There was one other bit of question I had as well, and this final thing, I did just wonder, for the local plan, you need to have evidence for what you're doing, and that's mentioned in the report that you've given to us. Is there some evidence gathering that should be going on with this, that should be progressed? If you could address that as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Graham.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'll take those points in turn. So in terms of the scope being more strategic rather than detailed, as Dave's just said, there was a report that went to the subcommittee in February, that talked about the scope of the plan in relation to the timescales that we are required to work towards. So as you'll know, as a new authority, we were given a timeline to have a new local plan in place for Somerset by 2028. To enable us to do that, and taking into account the direction that government policy is heading in, we have suggested that means that we need to take a slightly more strategic approach to the development of the local plan. That's not to say that it's not going to cover all issues that it needs to cover. It's to say that things like the detailed development management policies, which most of our local plans will have included in the main local plan document previously, they are things that we can probably leave for the moment, so they don't generally need to be covered in this first iteration of the local plan, and that's for a few reasons. So the key one being the timeline that we've got to work to, and we do have a series of development management policies that are in place already with varying levels of kind of compatibility at the moment, I would suggest. So there's a piece of work to be done there to understand whether there are any major issues with those policies and things that really need work to update those immediately. The second one is that there are new development management policies being developed for the country nationally. So we're expecting consultation from government on them, I think possibly next month, certainly relatively soon. And our assumption at this stage is that will probably cover off quite a lot of the sorts of things that you would normally cover through those development management policies locally. That's certainly their intention. What we don't know until we see it is how well that does the job. So there's a piece of work to do once they're consulted on and we know the direction that's going to understand whether there's anything further that will be required in the local plan. But yeah, so as I've said in the report, the issue of climate change and energy and other infrastructure related issues, they are key things that the plan will cover. It's just the level of detail of that policy I can't tell you right now because it hasn't been developed. So we're at a very early stage. The local plan engagement sessions are helping to shape what the vision, the objectives of the plan are, and therefore how those policies strategically will come together. But that will have to happen relatively quickly over the coming year before we're ready to publish a first draft of the local plan for consultation in April next year. In terms of saving existing policies, yes, it mentions that. Like I say, we've got a whole load of different development management policies that exist already, some of which will be perfectly usable and worthwhile to take forwards and retain. When you develop a new local plan, you have to say which policies of the existing adopted plan are being retained, which ones are being superseded. So that's normal practice, and it's quite often the case that you retain some. There's retained policies from various different plans in West Somerset and Taunton Deane areas, for instance, from much longer ago, sort of 2004, 2006 plans. So it's a relatively common practice to do things like that. We need to go through that process to understand whether any of those are worth keeping, bearing in mind we have 4 or 5 areas that have slightly different policies as it stands. In terms of likely to include, so it is just the case that we don't know what is going to be in that draft plan that we present yet, because we're still going through that process of the early engagement sessions, like I say. It will include information and probably a fair amount of detail in terms of the policies on energy and climate related issues. I'm fairly confident of that, but I can't say it for definite because they haven't been developed yet. So that's the reason for the likely word in there. And in terms of the evidence gathering that's going on, so we're in the process of pulling together a topic paper, if you like, about climate and energy related issues. That simply kind of pulls together the information that we know about what the issues are, what our wider context is. So in terms of the local aspirations and local sort of the council plans, objectives and things like that, as well as nationally, the things where planning can make a difference, what we could look to do as part of that, and starts to develop up the policy options as a part of that. So that's a piece of work that is going on now. That may well highlight further evidence gathering that needs to occur. And I mentioned in the report about, for instance, if we're going to be in a position to require zero carbon housing, for instance, we'll need to make sure that our viability evidence fully stacks up to enable that to happen, bearing in mind all of the kind of the draws on development viability. So yeah, that piece of work will identify if there's anything further that we need to be kind of working on as part of that. I think I've covered the questions there, but I'm happy to come
I think so, Graham. And I think Dave would probably want to come back.
No, thank you, Graham. It's been very helpful. So thank you for that. And obviously, yeah, we look forward to seeing how this now works through, and hope. And I think you know how we hope it will work through, and we look forward to seeing that, seeing how that now progresses.
Okay, Graham. I've got a question from Helen Kay, please.
Thank you, Martin. Just since we're on local plan, I've written to Graham, and I think you responded to me already, and I've also written someone else, and Tandy has responded. But some of the questions that I've asked have not really been answered, and that's why it's great to have you here today. You say, for example, I was particularly interested in the engagement sessions. You say that we are having to help develop policy, and I know there's a broad idea of having some member engagement, and also you've been consulting quite a lot with businesses already, and they're feeding into the local plan policies. You've indicated that you're going to be going through all the policies in the existing district plans and then sifting through which ones are relevant and which aren't. And I'm just wondering, when will it be that us as members get involved in this policy work? Because a lot of us are very interested in this. And we've already had, as Martin or someone said, some suggestions today that we need to have, for example, a dark skies policy in perhaps particularly the areas close to the, what are they called now, national landscapes. I know that in Mendip, there's a big question mark about the fact we've only got a 30% affordable housing requirement, and it really needs to be more like 40%, and that will help bring in young families. And I'm just wondering, at what point in this engagement process councillors are actually going to be involved? Is that Tandy? No, it's not Tandy. It's to Kate. Hello. Because we've had one session at Mendip, and it covered the whole of Mendip. We did not end up having the specific LCN sessions that we thought we were going to have. And we have not really, I've not noticed any other workshops in schools or standing outside of all the other things that were talked about by the nice young people that we had in from January to March that did some engagement work with us. I haven't seen a lot of those engagement things actually really manifesting themselves. Thank you.
Okay, Kate seems to have come in on this one. Did you want to answer that, Kate?
Yeah, no, happy to pick that up. Yeah, Helen, we totally understand that members have got a very particular interest in this, and we will be coordinating some specific member engagement sessions as the plan starts to develop. We're also looking at setting up a working group, so we'll be in touch if there are particular areas that you're interested in. But of course, the statutory consultation period will be, at the moment, is scheduled for April next year in terms of the draft plan. So I hope that helps to clarify where we are.
Yeah. I'm just a bit concerned that
Helen, I've got to finish this meeting at 1:30.
Yes, and Martin, I actually have taken a lot less time than a lot of other people.
Well, no, it's not. I've got to finish because there's another meeting coming in. I'll give you 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's all. Well, okay. All I was going to say is that I don't want it to be something that we're presented with, that officers put together and we're presented with to comment on, but we want early engagement with members. That's my request. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Sorry to have to cut you off, and I'm going to. I think that's it for this item now, because as I've just mentioned, we've got to draw a curtain over this one. Thank you all very much. I'm assuming there's not any other business. If there is, you'll have to wait. Thank you for coming. Thank you for staying the course. Thanks for your comments, and we'll see you in June. Bye bye.